Before the thunder of doctrines, before the rise of temples, before the echoes of sermons filled the air, there was only a whisper. It did not arrive in the noise of certainty, but in the tremor of intuition, the quiet sense that life carried more than it showed. Humanity, long before the name of Jesus was spoken, felt this whisper in dreams, in longings, in the sudden hush of wonder beneath the stars. It was the murmur of the kingdom within, an invitation not yet named but always known. The Urantia papers open with a vision of God as Father, eternal and intimate, source of all creation and companion of each soul. Paper 0, the foreword, is not an argument but a horizon, calling us to lift our gaze from the finite to the infinite. And Paper 1 tells us of the universal Father who dwells not only in the glory of paradise, but in the secret depths of every creature's heart. This paradox is the foundation. The God of galaxies is also the God of whispers. He reigns in eternity, yet inclines his presence to the silence of the soul. This whisper is not foreign. Jung described it as the archetype of the self, the image of wholeness and divinity latent within every psyche. It appears in dreams, in symbols, in the sudden pull toward meaning when everything else seems empty. It is not imposed from without, but rises from within, calling us toward integration, toward the recognition of a center deeper than ego. For Jung, the self was not mere psychological construct, but doorway into the sacred, the echo of divinity woven into the human condition. The Gospel of Thomas crystallizes this truth with startling simplicity. The kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you. Not future, not elsewhere, but here, hidden, yet waiting. The whisper is the seed of this awareness, that what we seek in distant heavens already dwells in the soil of our own being. To ignore it is to wander endlessly in exile. To heed it is to awaken to belonging. Sufi mystics have always known the whisper as the call of the beloved. Rumi sang, "There's a voice that doesn't use words. Listen, this is not a command, but a caress, the gentle insistence of love that seeks not to conquer, but to draw near." The beloved does not shout. He waits in silence, sows longing, teaches the heart to hunger for what it cannot name. The whisper is not absence, but presence in disguise. Across traditions, this subtle call has been the same. The Upanishads spoke of the Atman, the inner self that is one with the eternal. The Stoics sensed a rational fire ordering the cosmos and lighting the conscience. Indigenous wisdom has long heard the whisper in rivers, trees, winds, in the hush of dawn and the cry of birds. Always the same intuition. We are not alone, and the kingdom is not far. It begins here, where presence meets attention. The longing that arises from this whisper is not weakness, but strength. It unsettles, refusing to let us rest in half-truths or shallow comforts. It drives explorers to cross seas, philosophers to question, mystics to surrender, lovers to believe. Longing is the proof of the kingdom. If it were illusion, it would fade with time. But it deepens instead, echoing louder in silence, persisting in suffering, refusing to be silenced even by death. The whisper within is eternal because it flows from eternity. The God who walked with us in Jesus first walked within us as whisper. Long before Bethlehem, long before Jordan, long before Golgotha, humanity carried this trace of eternity. It is the seed of recognition, the reason why when Jesus proclaimed, "The kingdom of God is within you," some felt not confusion but recognition. They had always known, though they had never had the words. The whisper became word, The longing became presence. The intuition became revelation. The whisper within has never been confined to one land, one people, or one creed. It has spoken across centuries and civilizations, wearing many names but carrying the same essence. The kingdom is near, and it begins within. In the ancient temples of Egypt, seekers intuited that divinity was not far, but hidden in the soul's journey. The myth of Osiris told of death and rebirth, but beneath the story was a whisper that life could not be conquered, that light would emerge from darkness. In the hidden chambers where initiates walked through rituals of silence, the soul was trained to listen, to awaken to what could not be seen with eyes. In India, the sages of the Upanishads leaned close to the mystery and declared, Tat Tvam Sa, you are that. They heard, in meditation, the quiet truth that the eternal self is not separate from the human self. The whisper told them that what they sought in ritual and sacrifice was already alive in the core of their being. The kingdom was not in the heavens above, but in the stillness of consciousness. Among the Stoics of Greece and Rome, another form of the whisper emerged. They spoke of the logos, a rational fire that ordered the cosmos and lit the conscience. Marcus Aurelius, sitting beneath the weight of empire, turned inward and found a presence guiding him toward justice, humility, and fidelity. He wrote not of conquest, but of inner alignment. The kingdom was not to be built by swords, but lived through virtue. The Hebrew prophets also carried this whisper, though often through struggle. Jeremiah spoke of a law written not on stone, but on the heart. Ezekiel foresaw a spirit breathed into dry bones, reviving life. Isaiah declared that the oppressed and forgotten would see the dawn of God's presence. Beneath their fiery words was the same seed. The kingdom is not only in rituals of temple and sacrifice, but in the transformed heart, aligned with justice and mercy. The whisper was also sung by mystics whose names history barely records. In deserts and caves, in marketplaces and kitchens, they listened. Some called it the beloved, others the voice, others simply the presence. But all felt its insistence. Do not look outward alone, turn inward. Do not seek only in noise, listen in silence. For the kingdom is already near, already here, already within. And when Jesus spoke, proclaiming, the kingdom of God is within you, those who heard with open hearts recognized the voice. It was not foreign, it was familiar. It resonated with the whisper they had carried all along. His words were like light falling upon seeds that had waited long in darkness. What had been hidden in myth, hinted at in philosophy, sung in poetry, longed for in ritual, suddenly came alive. The whisper became proclamation. The seed burst into bloom. The Urantia papers remind us that revelation does not erase human search, but fulfills it. God has never left humanity without witness. The whisper has always been the adjuster's call, stirring within each soul, preparing minds to recognize truth when it comes in fuller light. What Jung described as the archetype of the self, what Thomas called the kingdom within, what the Sufis named the beloved, all are echoes of the same eternal presence. Humanity has always known, even when it did not know how to name it. Thus, history itself becomes testimony. Cultures rise and fall, philosophies shift, religions form and fracture, yet the whisper persists. It is the one continuity beneath all differences, the thread of divine presence weaving through the tapestry of human seeking. And the reason it persists is simple. It is not invention, but revelation, not fantasy, but reality. The kingdom is real because it is eternal, and it dwells where eternity meets time. in the silence of the soul. The whisper is not only a collective memory, nor solely a cultural inheritance. It is personal. It is the pulse beneath your own thoughts, the stirring you feel when silence deepens, the unease that rises when you live far from your truth. It is the quiet summons that says, there is more, and it is already within you. Each life, no matter how obscure or burdened, carries this same presence. The Urantia papers remind us that the universal Father dwells in every soul through the fragment of himself, the thought adjuster. This indwelling presence is the guarantee that no one is ever alone. Even when surrounded by noise, confusion, or despair, the whisper does not depart. It remains gently calling, inviting the soul to remember its origin and destiny. Jung saw this dynamic in the process of individuation, the movement toward wholeness that requires us to face our shadow, embrace our truth, and discover the self that transcends the ego. The whisper is what keeps pushing us forward in this journey, refusing to let us remain fragmented. It may disturb us, unsettle us, even wound us, but only so that we may awaken. As Rilke once wrote, our deepest fears are like dragons guarding our deepest treasures. The whisper is the treasure, and our resistances are the dragons. The Gospel of Thomas confronts us with the same challenge. If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring it forth, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. The whisper cannot be silenced forever. If ignored, it becomes restlessness, dissatisfaction, even despair. If welcomed, it becomes guidance, joy, freedom. The choice is ours. Exile or homecoming, fragmentation or wholeness, illusion or truth. The Sufi tradition offers a tender image here. The beloved, they say, knocks gently at the door of the heart. He does not force entry. He waits, patient, until the soul chooses to open. The whisper is this knock. Every longing for meaning, every ache for love, every hunger for truth is the sound of his hand at the door. The question is not whether he is near, but whether we will open. Often, we imagine the kingdom as distant, something to reach after years of struggle or at the end of life. Yet the whisper reveals otherwise. The kingdom is already here, seated within us, waiting to be noticed. It does not need to be imported. It needs to be uncovered. It is not created by effort, but revealed by attention. When we pause, when we listen, when we let silence speak, we discover what was always true. The God who walked with us also walks within us. This is why longing is never wasted. That ache you feel when the world's noise feels unbearable, that pull you sense toward beauty, that question that refuses to leave you alone, these are not signs of failure. They are signs of life. They're the whisper breaking through, reminding you of the temple within. They are invitations to turn inward, to awaken, to align. The whisper is intimate but also demanding. It calls you not only to comfort, but to transformation. It insists that you are more than fear, more than habit, more than ego. It asks you to step into the unknown, to trust, to surrender. This is why so many resist it. It feels like death to the self we have constructed. Yet what dies is illusion. What lives is truth. The whisper is not here to harm, but to free, not to diminish, but to reveal. And so, the whisper prepares each of us for the kingdom. It does not matter where you come from, what you believe, or how you have failed. The whisper is not earned. It is given. It is not a privilege. It is presence. It is the eternal seed planted in the soil of your life, waiting for your yes. To hear it is to awaken. To follow it is to live. To embody it is to discover the kingdom. not tomorrow, not elsewhere, but here, now within. The whisper that echoes within each soul is not a fragment lost in isolation. It is the thread that binds us to one another and to eternity. What begins as personal longing widens into collective memory, and what stirs in humanity's past converges with what stirs in you now. The kingdom is not separate from history, nor from community, nor from destiny. It is one reality unfolding on many levels, like a single song played through countless instruments. The Urantia papers remind us that religion, at its highest, is the unification of the human and the divine. It is the alignment of the finite with the infinite, the moment when a creature chooses to trust the adjuster's whisper rather than the noise of fear. This is why the whisper matters. It is the voice of eternity already present, guiding us toward the kingdom not as distant reward, but as present reality. To heed it is to enter into alignment with the universe itself. Mystics across cultures have described this same bond. Augustine discovered God as more intimate than his own soul. The Sufis spoke of the beloved weaving hearts together in one love. Eastern sages pointed to the eternal self, the Atman, as the ground of being in which all distinctions fade. Each testimony, though clothed in different words, affirms the same truth. The kingdom is one, eternal, indivisible, and its first doorway is within. For the whisper does more than console, it summons. It does not only soothe our loneliness, but calls us into responsibility. If the kingdom is within, then every choice matters. If God dwells in the heart, then every act is sacred. If eternity touches time in us, then we are never trivial, never expendable, never alone. The whisper is not passive memory, but active calling, an invitation to live as bearers of the kingdom, carriers of light, vessels of love. This is why the longing feels both tender and urgent. It comforts us in silence, but also refuses to let us remain unchanged. It stirs when we betray truth. It aches when we deny love. It unsettles when we settle for less than fidelity. The whisper does not condemn, but it does convict, urging us forward into greater alignment. It is the God who walked with us, now knocking at the door of our hearts, asking to walk within us. And so, the whisper prepares us not only for personal awakening, but for shared destiny. Humanity's great movements of justice, compassion, and reconciliation are born when individuals listen to that inner call and allow it to shape the world. The kingdom is within, but it is never merely private. When lived, it becomes visible in acts of mercy, in communities of love, in cultures that choose truth over deception, life over despair, light over shadow. This is the summons of the prologue. Listen, the God who reigns in eternity speaks here, in the depths of your own being. The kingdom is not far, it is near, not hidden beyond the stars, but planted within the soil of your life. To remember this is to awaken. To awaken is to align. To align is to live. The whisper is the beginning, but it is not the end. It prepares the way for the chapters ahead, where we will see how Jesus announced the kingdom, how he embodied it, how he revealed it as treasure hidden, temple discovered, communion lived, eternity unveiled. But before we journey outward, we must honor the beginning, the gentle, insistent whisper that tells us the kingdom is here, now, within. This is not only memory, but invitation. Not only longing, but presence. Not only whisper, but word. The question that remains is simple and eternal. Will you listen? When Jesus opened his mouth to announce the kingdom, he was not offering a political program nor promising liberation through force. His voice rose in Galilee, not in the courts of emperors, but among fishermen, farmers, mothers, children, the forgotten of society. What he brought was not a system to be built with armies, but a revolution of consciousness. The kingdom he proclaimed was not far, nor dependent on rulers or structures. It was near, hidden yet present, waiting to be revealed in the transformation of the heart. The Urantia papers describe these early proclamations as a deliberate reorientation of human expectation. Paper 137 recounts how the people waited for a Messiah of conquest, a king who would break Rome's chains and restore Israel's glory. But Jesus redirected this longing. His kingdom would not arrive with banners or armies. It would not raise thrones or topple governments. Instead, it would take root in silence like a seed in the soil of the soul. Paper 140, in the Sermon on the Mount, clarifies the radical core. Blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. The kingdom begins not with domination, but with humility, purity, compassion. This was a revolution, but not the kind the world expected. It was interior, invisible to eyes seeking spectacle, disruptive to hearts clinging to pride. Jesus proclaimed that the kingdom was not something to be awaited in a distant future, nor imposed from above, but something to be discovered now, within and among. The kingdom of God is within you. These words, simple yet profound, reframed human destiny. Eternity had already entered time, and heaven was already near. Lao Tzu, centuries before, intuited something similar in the Tao. He spoke of the way that governs without ruling, flows without forcing, nourishes without demanding. The Tao is invisible, yet everything depends on it. It is soft like water, yet nothing can resist it. In announcing the kingdom, Jesus revealed a parallel truth. The reign of God is not coercive but subtle, not external but pervasive. It moves quietly through the conscience, gently reshaping lives from the inside out. The kingdom is not power imposed, but love incarnated. Gandhi, millennia later, would embody this same principle in the struggle for India's freedom. He called it satyagraha, the force of truth. Victory, he believed, was not won by violence, but by fidelity to conscience, by embodying the change one seeks in the world. Gandhi's revolution was inner before it was outer. Likewise, the kingdom Jesus announced begins with the heart before it transforms society. The revolutions of history begin with armies. The revolution of the kingdom begins with prayer, forgiveness, love. This message was radical not because it denied the world, but because it offered a deeper way of transforming it. Structures may change, rulers may fall, empires may rise, but unless the human heart is changed, injustice remains. Jesus knew this. His kingdom was not a denial of justice, but its foundation, a justice rooted in love, not in fear, in mercy, not in domination. The Sermon on the Mount is a manifesto of this new order, a revolution that begins in the invisible chambers of conscience and radiates outward into acts of peace, reconciliation, and compassion. The people who heard him were astonished, for he spoke with authority unlike the scribes. He was not repeating traditions or reciting laws. He was unveiling a reality that resonated with their deepest longings. They expected liberation by force, but they felt the whisper of truth, that real freedom is inner, and that no empire can enslave the soul aligned with God. The kingdom he announced could not be conquered by Rome, for it was not of this world, and yet it transformed this world more profoundly than any empire ever could. The kingdom Jesus announced was not a theory to be debated, but a life to be lived. Nowhere is this clearer than in the Sermon on the Mount, where his words fall like light upon the path of the soul. Here, the whisper of the kingdom becomes a manifesto, not of laws imposed from outside, but of transformation rising from within. The crowd gathered on the hillside, expecting perhaps pronouncements of judgment or promises of liberation from Rome. Instead, they heard paradoxes that turned the world upside down. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. With each sentence, Jesus dismantled the expectations of power, wealth, and dominance. The kingdom he described did not favor the strong, the rich, or the rulers. It welcomed the humble, the suffering, the merciful. Paper 140 of the Urantia Papers describes this sermon as the clearest outline of the kingdom's nature. It was not external authority, but internal transformation. To be poor in spirit was not weakness, but openness, an emptiness ready to be filled by God. To mourn was not defeat, but recognition of life's fragility and the compassion it awakens. To be meek was not to be crushed, but to inherit the earth by refusing to dominate. Each beatitude revealed the kingdom as inversion. Where the world prized power, God blessed vulnerability. Where society rewarded pride, God exalted humility. Where history crowned conquerors, the kingdom lifted the peacemakers. In these words, Jesus announced not a new law, but a new consciousness. The Sermon on the Mount is not about external compliance, but inner alignment. It asks not, what do you possess, but who are you becoming? It shifts focus from the visible to the invisible, from the outward to the inward, from systems to souls. The kingdom is no longer about boundaries of nation or purity of ritual, but about the posture of the heart. Lao Tzu had spoken centuries before of the Tao as a way that appears weak, but overcomes all strength, a way that yields yet conquers. The meekness Jesus blesses carries the same paradox. The kingdom's power is revealed not in domination, but in surrender, not in noise, but in silence, not in conquering others, but in conquering self. The Tao and the kingdom converge in their insistence that true strength flows from hidden depth, not from outward display. Gandhi, reflecting on this sermon, would later say that it contained the essence of nonviolence: to bless the persecuted, to turn the other cheek, to love enemies. These were not strategies of survival, but revelations of a deeper order. Gandhi saw in Jesus' words the power to resist injustice without becoming its mirror, to overcome evil with good. In the Sermon on the Mount, Gandhi heard not passivity, but revolution, a revolution born in the conscience, one that no empire could suppress. The people who listened to Jesus on that hillside may not have grasped the cosmic depth of his words, but they felt their authority. They recognized a voice that spoke not like the scribes, but with the weight of reality itself. It was as if the whisper they had long carried within finally found expression. What had been intuition was now proclamation. What had been longing was now invitation. The kingdom was not only coming, it was already here. Thus, the Sermon on the Mount is not mere teaching, but unveiling. It unveils the kingdom as presence, consciousness, revolution of love. It shows that the kingdom is not achieved through power, but received through openness, not established by conquest, but revealed by compassion. It is a kingdom hidden from eyes that seek grandeur, but clear to hearts that listen for the whisper within. The words of Jesus fell into a landscape heavy with expectation. Israel longed for deliverance, not in the realm of conscience, but in the realm of politics. The people looked for a king like David, a warrior to break the Roman yoke and restore national pride. priests envisioned a purified temple where ritual would reign supreme. Zealots dreamed of uprising, scribes of stricter law, common folk of justice at last. Into this web of hopes and demands, Jesus announced a kingdom utterly different, and by doing so, he unsettled everyone. Paper 137 of the Urantia Papers recalls how even his disciples struggled to understand. They were drawn to his presence. They felt the authority of his words. Yet they still whispered of thrones and armies, still hoped for positions of power in a kingdom they assumed would rival Rome. But Jesus redirected their gaze. My kingdom is not of this world. It was not a kingdom to be carved by swords, but to be born in souls. This was a confrontation, not of violence, but of vision. To the zealots, he offered not war, but peace. To the priests, not more ritual, but inner worship. To the rulers, not rebellion, but truth. To the people, not national restoration, but personal transformation. His kingdom could not be mapped on borders or decrees. It could not be guarded by soldiers or built with taxes. It was, as he said, like leaven hidden in flour, like a mustard seed, small and overlooked, like treasure buried in a field. Invisible to the impatient, undeniable to the attentive. The Sermon on the Mount made this contrast plain. Where Rome boasted of its peace through domination, Jesus blessed the peacemakers who sought reconciliation. Where religion exalted purity codes and visible sacrifice, Jesus blessed the pure in heart. Where empires rewarded ambition, he praised the meek. This was not mere inversion of values. It was revelation of a deeper reality, a kingdom aligned with the eternal rather than the temporal. Jung might call this the eruption of archetypal truth into history, the self breaking through the illusions of collective shadow. The people projected their desire for external saviors, yet Jesus reflected their deeper need: union with God, transformation of soul. What he announced was not an escape from Rome's oppression, but liberation from the bondage of fear, pride, and self. His revolution was of the interior, and because of that, it was indestructible. In many ways, Jesus' proclamation resembles the Tao's refusal to be confined by force. Just as the Tao cannot be grasped yet sustains all things, so the kingdom cannot be seized yet transforms all life. It is the way that flows silently, overcoming without violence, enduring without spectacle. This was precisely what bewildered his contemporaries. They looked for spectacle, but the kingdom arrived in silence. History shows how deeply this inversion disturbed the powerful. The priests feared loss of authority, for if God's presence dwelt in every heart, the monopoly of the temple would falter. The rulers feared unrest, for if people pledged allegiance to a kingdom not of this world, their loyalty to Caesar would weaken. Even the disciples wrestled, for if power meant service, thrones meant humility, and greatness meant becoming last, then the kingdom demanded everything. And yet, for those who listened deeply, hope ignited. The weary, the forgotten, the oppressed. They heard in Jesus' voice not the rhetoric of politicians, but the truth of eternity. They recognized the whisper they had carried all along, that real freedom is not granted by rulers, but by God, not written on laws, but on hearts. The kingdom he announced was not just promise, but presence, and once heard, it could not be forgotten. The kingdom Jesus announced was not the culmination of a political dream, but the birth of a revolution that could not be contained by history. It began quietly, in words spoken to ordinary people on a hillside, yet those words carried a power that reshaped civilization. They revealed a truth that transcends empires. The reign of God is not built on conquest, but on conscience. not on force but on fidelity, not on external display but on interior transformation. This is why the announcement of the kingdom is more than a sermon. It is revelation. It reveals the nature of God as Father, not distant ruler, but intimate presence. It reveals the nature of humanity as children of that Father, carrying His image within. It reveals the purpose of life, not as accumulation or domination, but as alignment with love, justice, and truth. In proclaiming the kingdom, Jesus was not offering an option among many. He was unveiling the deepest reality of existence. The Urantia papers emphasize that this message was not meant to abolish human culture or religion, but to elevate them. Every tradition that had glimpsed the whisper now found its fulfillment. The archetype Jung described as the self, the Tao Lao Tzu described as the invisible way, the Satyagraha Gandhi embodied as the force of truth, all converged in the kingdom announced by Jesus. In Him, the whisper became word, and the hidden became manifest. The revolution He began was subtle, but it was unstoppable. Empires would rise and fall, but His words endured. Religions would fracture and reform, but the essence of the kingdom remained. God's reign in the heart, expressed in love, lived in communion. Even when misunderstood, even when distorted, the message could not be silenced. For the kingdom is not dependent on institutions. It lives wherever hearts listen to the whisper and choose to embody it. For each listener, then and now, the announcement of the kingdom is both comfort and challenge. It comforts by assuring us that God is near, that His presence is not far but within. It challenges by demanding transformation, by calling us to become poor in spirit, merciful, pure in heart, peacemakers. It insists that the kingdom is not an idea to admire, but a life to live. This is the invitation, to let the kingdom announced by Jesus become the kingdom embodied in us. To recognize that the revolution begins in the hidden places of the soul, in choices unseen by the world but seen by God. To discover that eternity is not postponed but present, waiting for our consent. The whisper has spoken, the announcement has been made. The question that remains is whether we will receive it. And so the chapter closes where it began, with a revolution not of armies but of hearts, not of thrones but of consciences. The kingdom Jesus announced still resounds, still summons, still transforms. It is here, it is now, it is within. The kingdom that Jesus announced was not explained through systems or defended by arguments. Instead, He spoke in parables, images simple enough for a child to grasp, yet deep enough to confound the wise. Among these, some of the most striking are the parables of hiddenness. The treasure buried in a field, the pearl of great price, the leaven working invisibly through dough, the seed that grows in silence. These images reveal a kingdom both mysterious and joyful, concealed yet transformative. In paper 151 of the Urantia papers, the parables are described as Jesus' chosen method to reveal truth to the open-hearted while veiling it from those closed in pride. A parable is not a lecture, it is an invitation. It does not force knowledge, but awakens recognition. It is a key that only turns if the listener is willing. And among His parables, the theme of the hidden treasure is central. The kingdom is here, but it must be discovered. Consider the parable of the treasure hidden in a field. A man stumbles upon it, covers it quickly, and in joy sells everything he owns to buy that field. Nothing could be simpler, yet in that story lies the heartbeat of the kingdom. The treasure was always there, buried beneath ordinary soil. No one else noticed, no one else valued it, until one person, attentive and fortunate, uncovered it. The discovery was so profound that it reordered his life, possessions, priorities, even his very sense of value. For the kingdom is like this, hidden in plain sight, waiting to be recognized, worth everything once found. The parable of the pearl mirrors the same truth. A merchant searching for fine pearls finds one of surpassing beauty and sells all to purchase it. The kingdom, again, is not imposed from outside, but discovered in longing. It is not given to the indifferent, but revealed to the seeker who values it above all else. And when it is found, joy floods the soul, not sorrow. To lose everything for the sake of the kingdom is not sacrifice, but liberation, not loss, but fulfillment. These parables speak not of an external empire, but of an interior reality. The treasure is not far. It lies within. The pearl is not remote. It gleams in the soul. The kingdom is already here, seated in the soil of existence, present in the silence of the heart, waiting to be uncovered. The discovery is not about conquering, but about noticing, not about striving, but about awakening. In Hermetic tradition, seekers also spoke of hidden treasures, the philosopher's stone, the elixir of life, the secret wisdom concealed in nature. These were not merely material pursuits, but symbols of an inner process, the discovery of divine reality concealed in the world and in the self. The Hermetic saying, "As above, so below," echoes Jesus' parables. The kingdom is hidden in the below of human life, yet reflects the above of divine reality. The treasure is buried, but it shines with cosmic significance. Buddhist teaching offers a similar resonance. Zen masters often pointed to the simplicity of enlightenment, hidden in ordinary life. One master would raise a flower, another would ask a disciple to fetch water or chop wood. The lesson was the same. The treasure is not in distant heavens, but in the simplicity of this moment. To awaken is not to escape the ordinary, but to discover its hidden depth. The kingdom Jesus described carries this same paradox, hidden in plain sight, revealed in simplicity, transformative in silence. The parable of the leaven reinforces this. A woman hides a small measure of yeast in flour, and silently, invisibly, it transforms the whole batch. The kingdom is like that, unseen yet unstoppable, small yet pervasive. It does not dominate by force, but works quietly, reshaping everything from within. What empires cannot accomplish with armies, the kingdom accomplishes with love. What rulers cannot impose with decrees, the kingdom infuses with presence. These parables are not just stories of long ago. They are mirrors. Each listener must ask, have I seen the treasure? Have I recognized the pearl? Have I noticed the leaven? The kingdom is here, but it requires eyes to see, ears to hear, hearts to awaken. It is hidden not because it is absent, but because we are distracted. To discover it is to rediscover ourselves, to awaken to the joy of eternity already present. The parables of the hidden treasure and the pearl are not simply metaphors of religious devotion. They are descriptions of transformation at the deepest level of human psychology. To discover the kingdom is not to add something external, but to undergo a reorientation of the self. Values, desires, priorities, all are reordered by the discovery. The Urantia Papers, paper 152, emphasize that Jesus used these parables not as abstract teaching, but as mirrors of human experience. Those who truly saw the kingdom did not merely assent to an idea. They were compelled to act. The man who found the treasure sold everything. The merchant who saw the pearl surrendered all possessions. Discovery led not to theory, but to decision. Joy drove sacrifice. Recognition demanded response. From a psychological perspective, this is the shift Jung described when the self begins to emerge as center, displacing the ego. The ego clings to possessions, identities, securities. But when the deeper reality of the self, aligned with God, breaks through, the ego's treasures pale. The kingdom functions like the hidden treasure. Once glimpsed, it relativizes all else. What once seemed indispensable is now expendable. What once seemed trivial becomes luminous. The axis of the self shifts from grasping to surrender, from fear to trust. This is why Jesus speaks of joy, not burden. In his joy, he went and sold all he had. Joy is the sign of authentic discovery. It is not grim duty that makes one release lesser things, but delight in something greater. The kingdom liberates not by coercion, but by attraction. The treasure compels because it reveals the poverty of all counterfeits. The pearl shines with such beauty that everything else seems dull. To encounter the kingdom is to awaken to the realization. This is what I was made for. This is what I have always longed for. Buddhist wisdom resonates here. Zen teachers often warned against chasing enlightenment as an object to acquire, for the search itself can become another attachment. Yet they also affirmed that when awakening happens, it reorders everything. The monk who had once sought mystical visions finds enlightenment in washing his bowl. The disciple who imagined distant heavens learns that chopping wood and carrying water are themselves sacred when seen with awakened eyes. The treasure, like the kingdom, is not elsewhere. It is hidden in the soil of the everyday, waiting for perception to shift. Hermetic imagery adds another dimension. The hidden treasure of alchemy, the philosopher's stone, was not about gold but about transformation. It symbolized the discovery of what endures, the essence concealed beneath appearances. To find it required patience, purity, and vision. Likewise, the kingdom is not visible to the superficial gaze, but only to the attentive heart. It demands the alchemy of perception, the refinement of desire, the willingness to dig beneath surface soil. The psychological process is demanding. To find the treasure is to confront illusions. The ego resists surrender, clinging to what is familiar. The world ridicules, asking, why give up so much for something invisible? Yet those who have glimpsed the kingdom cannot return to indifference. Once seen, the treasure cannot be unseen. Once heard, the whisper cannot be silenced. The decision to reorient life is not without cost, but it is fueled by joy that outlasts sacrifice. This is why the parables insist on hiddenness. If the kingdom were obvious, it would not require faith. If it could be purchased cheaply, it would not transform. Hiddenness is not cruelty, but invitation. It separates the curious from the committed, the distracted from the devoted. The treasure is hidden so that only those who value it enough to seek, to sell, to surrender will possess it. This is not elitism, but alignment. Only when we desire truth above all else are we ready to receive it. Thus, the parables of hidden treasure are maps of inner transformation. They teach that the kingdom is present but must be discovered, valuable but must be chosen, hidden but waiting for the one who seeks. They remind us that the discovery is always personal, always costly, always joyful. And they invite us to ask, what am I willing to release to gain what cannot be lost? The parables of the treasure and the pearls speak of personal discovery, but Jesus did not leave the kingdom confined to individual experience. He added another layer with the images of the leaven and the growing seed. These parables remind us that the kingdom, though hidden, has cosmic reach. It begins in the secrecy of one heart, but expands invisibly and irresistibly. until it transforms the whole. In paper 151 of the Urantia Papers, the parable of the leaven is described as one of the clearest insights into the kingdom's nature. A woman hides a small measure of yeast in a large amount of flour, and silently it permeates everything. No sound, no spectacle, no force, only quiet transformation. The kingdom is like this. Though it may begin unnoticed, though it may seem insignificant, its power is pervasive. Once introduced, it cannot be stopped. The image is profound. Yeast disappears into flour. It becomes invisible, indistinguishable. And yet its influence changes everything, swelling the dough, preparing it for nourishment. In the same way, the kingdom disappears into the soil of human lives, into the fabric of communities, into the currents of history. It does not announce itself with banners or trumpets. It does its work in silence. And yet, its presence is undeniable. Where mercy spreads, where justice awakens, where compassion is practiced, the hidden leaven of the kingdom is at work. The parable of the seed echoes this mystery. A farmer sows seeds, and while he sleeps and rises, the seed grows. He knows not how. Life itself carries the hidden force of transformation. The kingdom, once planted, grows according to its own rhythm, its own inner vitality. It does not depend on constant human control. It depends on the living presence of God. This is why the kingdom is both already here and still becoming. It is already planted, already alive, but its fullness unfolds gradually, silently, inexorably. Hermetic wisdom understood transformation as a hidden process. Alchemists spoke of the opus magnum, the great work, as a gradual transmutation, not a sudden conquest. Just as the philosopher's stone worked invisibly, turning base metals into gold, so the kingdom transforms the base fabric of life into something radiant. It does not impose, it permeates. It does not crush, it elevates. It is divine alchemy, God's presence transmuting the ordinary into the eternal. Zen masters also captured this truth. They taught that enlightenment is not an extraordinary event, but the awakening to what has always been. The seed does not import life from outside. It carries life within, waiting for the right conditions to emerge. In the same way, the kingdom is not foreign to us. It is already planted in the soil of our being, already active in the world, already whispering in history. To awaken is to recognize its growth. These parables also reveal the communal dimension of the kingdom. The treasure may be discovered personally, but the leaven works corporately. The seed may be sown in one field, but it produces fruit that nourishes many. The kingdom is not only within you, but also among you. It creates a new community, a new fraternity, a new humanity bound not by law or blood, but by love. Wherever the kingdom grows, isolation gives way to communion, estrangement to reconciliation, fear to trust. The cosmic reach of these parables cannot be ignored. The leaven does not stop with one loaf, nor the seed with one field. The Urantia Papers affirm that the kingdom has implications beyond this world, for it is part of the eternal plan of God. What begins in the hidden soil of Urantia's hearts contributes to the greater harmony of creation. Each transformed soul is a node of light in the vast web of reality, each act of love or resonance that ripples through the universe. Thus, the hidden treasure is never merely private. The pearl, once found, radiates outward. The leaven permeates. The seed multiplies. The kingdom is mystery, yes, but not a mystery to hoard. It is a mystery that spreads, silently yet inexorably, until all creation is touched. The hidden treasure, the pearl of great price, the leaven in the dough, the seed in the soil. All these parables converge upon a single truth. The kingdom is the greatest discovery of life. It is hidden, yes, but not absent. It is veiled, yes, but only so that our seeking may awaken our seeing. And once found, nothing remains the same. The Urantia papers remind us that the kingdom is not reward but reality. It is not something added at the end of life, but the very foundation of existence. To discover it is not to escape the world, but to see it anew. Suddenly, what seemed ordinary glows with hidden light. The mundane becomes sacrament, the common becomes holy. The field that once looked barren reveals treasure beneath its soil. The world itself becomes transparent to eternity. This discovery brings joy that no circumstance can erase. The man in the parable sells all he is not with reluctance, but with delight. He does not mourn what he loses because what he gains exceeds it infinitely. This is the paradox of the kingdom. Surrender feels like loss only until the treasure is seen. Once recognized, everything else is gladly released. Joy is the measure of authentic discovery, the unmistakable sign that the soul has found its home. Mystics across ages testify to this joy. Rumi laughed and wept in the presence of the beloved, saying, "I have been looking for myself." Augustine confessed, "Our hearts are restless until they rest in you." Zen masters smiled at the simplicity of enlightenment, marveling that what they sought in arduous journeys was hidden in the present moment. Joy is not accessory, but essence, for the kingdom is not burden, but blessing, not weight, but wings. Yet this joy is not meant to be hoarded. The treasure discovered becomes treasure shared. The pearl purchased becomes beauty offered. The leaven hidden transforms not one loaf, but many. The kingdom is always communal, always expansive. What one soul discovers radiates outward, touching families, communities, generations. One life, aligned with God, becomes a point of light in the web of creation, inspiring others to search, to see, to rejoice. The hidden treasure also demands courage. To live by it is to swim against the current of a world that prizes the visible over the invisible, possession over presence, noise over silence. Many will not understand why someone would surrender for something unseen. But the one who is seen knows. It is not unseen but hidden, not absent but waiting, not imaginary but more real than anything else. This conviction sustains the soul through doubt, ridicule, even suffering. For what is found in the kingdom cannot be taken away. And so, these parables close with invitation. They ask each listener not simply to admire the stories, but to enter them. You are the one walking in a field. Will you recognize the treasure? You are the merchant seeking pearls. Will you value the one of surpassing beauty? You are the baker. Will you trust the hidden leaven? You are the farmer. Will you let the seed grow in its own time? The kingdom is not about others' discoveries, but your own. The kingdom Jesus revealed is treasure enough for eternity, pearl enough to outshine the stars, leaven enough to raise creation itself. It is hidden, yes, but hidden for you, not from you. And once you glimpse it, you will know the joy that changes everything. Long before cathedrals of stone lifted their spires toward the sky, humanity carried within itself a sanctuary more ancient, more intimate, and more enduring, the temple of the heart. It is here, in the hidden sanctuary of the soul, that the divine chooses to dwell. Not in palaces, not in rituals alone, not in distant heavens, but in the innermost chamber of human life. The Urantia papers declare in paper 196 that God is not only transcendent, but also immanent. dwelling within the human soul through the fragment of his spirit, the thought adjuster. This presence is not metaphorical, but real. The universal Father, who upholds galaxies, lives also in the silence of every individual heart. To recognize this truth is to discover that the greatest temple is not built by human hands, but woven into our very being. Augustine captured this paradox with words that have echoed through centuries. God is more intimate to me than I am to myself. We often search outside for the divine, in doctrines, in rituals, in distant revelations. Yet the presence we seek is closer than our own breath. More intimate than memory, deeper than desire, closer than thought, God dwells within. The temple is not elsewhere. It is here, hidden in the silence of the heart. The mystic Rumi sang of this same truth in his own tone. Why wander from house to house? Looking for the beloved? He lives in your chest. For the Sufi, the heart is the Kaaba of God, the inner sanctuary where the beloved abides. The search for the divine is not a journey across deserts or oceans, but a homecoming to the chamber already within. The kingdom is discovered not by conquering distance, but by listening to the silence inside. Teresa of Avila, in her vision of the interior castle, described the soul as a vast crystal palace, with many rooms leading deeper toward the center, where God dwells in radiant intimacy. Most people, she lamented, live in the outer courts, distracted by noise, reluctant to enter within. But for those who dare to journey inward, each step reveals greater light, until the soul meets the one who is always waiting. Her vision is the echo of the Urantia truth. The adjuster already inhabits the innermost chamber. To awaken is to enter that sanctuary. This discovery transforms the meaning of religion. It is no longer about merely external observances, though these may guide us. It is about interior transformation. The altar is conscience. The liturgy is love. The sacrifice is surrender. The offering is presence. When Jesus declared, "The kingdom of God is within you," he was not speaking in metaphor. He was unveiling this temple of the heart, inviting humanity to move from ritual to reality, from shadow to substance, from outward performance to inward communion. But the inner temple is hidden, and like all treasures, it requires attention. We often fail to enter because the noise of the world drowns the whisper of the sacred. We chase after temples built of stone, forgetting the temple of silence within. We busy ourselves with duties, anxieties, distractions, never pausing long enough to notice the presence already here. Yet the doorway is always open. At any moment, in the quiet of breath, in the stillness of attention, the temple reveals itself. To discover the inner temple is to encounter both intimacy and responsibility. If God dwells within, then every act, every choice, every thought carries a sacred weight. The temple is not visited occasionally. It is inhabited constantly. Every injustice wounds it. Every kindness adorns it. Every act of love expands it. Life itself becomes liturgy when lived in awareness of the indwelling presence. Thus, the kingdom is not far, not abstract, not distant. It is here, in the temple of your heart, where eternity meets time and where God's whisper becomes word. To live in this awareness is to walk in holiness, not because of external rituals alone, but because life itself has become worship. If the heart is truly a temple, then it is both a place of communion and a place of struggle. The sanctuary is real, but so is the noise that surrounds it. Within us lies the still chamber where the adjuster dwells, yet also the clamor of ego, fear, and distraction. The inner temple is not discovered once and for all. It must be entered again and again, in fidelity and patience, as one learns to distinguish the whisper of God from the echoes of self. The Urantia papers affirm that the adjuster never abandons the soul, even when the individual resists. God remains faithful, silently working, waiting for recognition. Yet the ego often resists this presence. The heart is torn between two altars, one that serves pride, ambition, and comfort, and another that bows before love, truth, and surrender. The struggle is not external, but interior, the daily choice of which temple will define our life. Augustine confessed this tension in his own heart. He sought God in pleasures, ambitions, philosophies, but all left him restless. Only when he turned inward did he discover the presence closer than himself. His restless heart became the battlefield where desire clashed with grace. In discovering God as intimacy, he also discovered the demand to reorder his loves, to surrender illusions, to choose the temple of the eternal over the shrine of the fleeting. Rumi captured this paradox with disarming honesty. This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival. Welcome them all. The heart, like a temple, is also a guest house where anger, joy, sorrow, and longing pass through. Yet beyond the shifting guests is the eternal host. The mystic's task is not to deny the noise, but to listen beneath it, to discover the beloved who remains when all else passes. Silence is not the absence of conflict, but the discovery of presence in the midst of it. Teresa of Avila spoke of this struggle in her interior castle. She described how the soul, while dwelling in its crystal palace, often lingers in the outer rooms, distracted by trivialities, even besieged by forces that resist its journey inward. Only with courage, humility, and prayer does the soul advance toward the central chamber. The journey to the innermost room is not escape but battle, requiring discernment of what is illusion and what is truth. The temple is radiant, but the path is narrow. Modern psychology echoes this reality. Jung's notion of individuation insists that one must confront the shadow before encountering the self. The heart as temple is not discovered by bypassing inner conflict, but by integrating it. The divine presence does not erase human struggle. It transfigures it. The adjuster whispers not in denial of our humanity, but through it, guiding us in a wholeness. Thus, the temple is holy not because it is untouched by chaos, but because God dwells even in the midst of it. The silence of the inner temple is therefore not automatic. It requires practice, attention, fidelity. Prayer, meditation, contemplation. These are not empty rituals, but ways of entering the sanctuary, of quieting the clamor, so the whisper may be heard. Jesus himself modeled this rhythm, withdrawing into solitude, seeking communion in silence before returning to the crowds. His life revealed that the true temple is not found on mountains or in cities, but wherever the soul turns inward to meet the Father. Yet even in silence, the struggle remains. The ego resists surrender, preferring the noise of certainty to the vulnerability of presence. Distractions multiply, fears intrude, doubts gnaw. But it is precisely here that the kingdom proves its strength. The temple does not collapse because of noise, it endures. God is not abandoned because of resistance. He waits. The adjuster is patient, eternal, gentle. The invitation is never withdrawn. Thus, the inner temple is both sanctuary and battlefield, silence and struggle. To discover it is to discover that life itself is holy ground, and that every day we are asked, will I enter the temple? Will I listen to the whisper? Will I allow the presence to reign in me? The kingdom is within, but it awaits our consent. To enter the inner temple is to discover that the silence of the heart is not empty, but full of a presence that connects us beyond ourselves. What begins as solitary encounter unfolds as communion. The temple within is not only the meeting place of the soul and God, it is the altar where the human and the cosmic are united. The Urantia papers describe this mystery with luminous clarity. The adjuster, dwelling within, is not merely a spark of comfort, but a fragment of God Himself, carrying the entire universe's truth into the center of the soul. To encounter Him is to touch the infinite. This means the heart is not an isolated chamber, but a node in a cosmic web, a sanctuary where eternity meets time. When you enter your inner temple, you do not withdraw from the universe. You connect to its deepest harmony. Augustine's confession echoes this reality. In discovering God as more intimate than himself, he also discovered his belonging to a greater whole. The temple of the heart does not isolate but binds, making us aware that our lives are interwoven with all creation. To enter within is to open outward. To hear the whisper is to join the symphony of the stars. The temple is both the smallest and the greatest space, small enough to dwell in the human soul, vast enough to hold infinity. Rumi painted this with images of love. He said the heart is a meeting hall where the beloved dances with the soul, and in that dance all separation dissolves. The inner temple becomes cosmic not because it is grand, but because it reveals that the whole cosmos is grounded in love. To pray within the temple of the heart is to join the rhythm of galaxies, to align breath with eternity, to let one small flame merge with the eternal fire. Teresa of Avila also hinted at this expansive dimension. As the soul journeys deeper into the castle, she says, it discovers not isolation but union with God that radiates outward into union with others. The central chamber of the castle is not a private chamber of possession, but a dwelling where the soul becomes flame, where love burns so brightly it cannot remain contained. In the heart's temple, God's indwelling is not only for one person, but for the sake of the whole world. This is why the temple of the heart has always been linked with responsibility. If God dwells within, then our choices ripple outward into cosmic consequence. The altar of the heart is not merely personal devotion, but cosmic alignment. When you choose love instead of fear, mercy instead of judgment, fidelity instead of betrayal, you are not merely decorating your own temple. You are releasing light into the greater whole. Each act of truth reverberates. Each prayer expands. Each surrender strengthens the invisible web of the kingdom. Here the language of science and mysticism converge. Physicists speak of fields that connect particles across distances, of hidden networks that underlie visible matter. Mystics speak of love as the field that binds all beings. The inner temple is the place where this is experienced firsthand. To sit in silence is to feel that one's heartbeat is not isolated, but in rhythm with creation itself. To surrender to the adjuster's whisper is to align with the cosmic order. The kingdom within is also the kingdom among, and the temple of the heart is the doorway between. And yet, this communion is not abstract. It manifests in daily life. The soul that knows its inner temple begins to live differently in the outer world. Relationships shift, compassion deepens, forgiveness flows more freely. The cosmic union discovered within translates into concrete acts of love. The temple's silence becomes action, its mystery becomes justice, its communion becomes service. To enter the temple is to emerge transformed, carrying the presence of God into every encounter. Thus, the inner temple is never merely personal. It is cosmic, communal, eternal. To enter, it is to become part of something larger than oneself, to live as participant in the kingdom that transcends worlds. The whisper within is not a private comfort, but a summons to communion with God, with others, with the whole of creation. To know the heart as temple is to recognize that every moment of life is already sacred. The altar is not distant, but present in the choices we make, the thoughts we cultivate, the love we embody. Entering the inner temple is not escape from the world, but a way of inhabiting it differently. Walking in awareness that God is closer than breath, nearer than thought, present in all things. The Urantia Papers, paper 196, remind us that the indwelling adjuster is the living bond between creature and creator, the assurance that no life is without meaning. When we live in awareness of this presence, daily life becomes liturgy. Work becomes offering, suffering becomes prayer, relationships become communion. The temple is not visited only in silence. It expands into every action, every encounter, every breath. Augustine's confession, Rumi's poetry, Teresa's castle, all point toward this same truth. The kingdom is not postponed but embodied, not distant but imminent, not abstract but incarnate. To discover the temple within is to realize that holiness is woven into the fabric of life itself. Every gesture can become sacrament when done in love. Every word can echo prayer when spoken in truth. The heart, then, becomes the meeting point of heaven and earth. The divine presence within does not diminish human freedom, but elevates it, asking us to become collaborators in the work of the kingdom. To live from the temple is to carry light into darkness, compassion into conflict, fidelity into fragility. It is to make of one's life an open door through which the eternal may enter the world. This is why silence matters. Silence is not mere absence of noise, but the posture of listening, the willingness to let God speak. In silence, the temple reveals its radiance. In silence, the whisper grows audible. The contemplative who enters this silence does not withdraw from life, but returns to it renewed, carrying presence into every ordinary act. The hidden temple thus becomes visible, not in spectacle, but in love embodied. The summons of the inner temple is clear. It invites us not only to believe, but to dwell, not only to admire, but to embody. The kingdom of God is not merely to be spoken of, but lived. The whisper calls us to turn inward, to surrender illusions, to discover the dwelling place where God has always waited. And once found, it cannot remain hidden. The one who has entered the temple becomes a living sanctuary, a bearer of the kingdom in the midst of the world. And so, the invitation extends to every reader, every seeker, every soul. Do not wander endlessly in search of distant shrines. Do not wait for external signs or spectacular revelations. The temple you seek is already here, within you, radiant with the presence of the eternal. Step inside. Listen. Allow your life itself to become worship, your being itself to become altar, your heart itself to become dwelling place. For the kingdom is not elsewhere. It is not tomorrow. It is now. It is here. It is within. If the kingdom of God is within, then the battlefield of the kingdom is also within. Before it becomes visible in society, before it reshapes communities, the struggle begins in the hidden terrain of the heart. The soul is not only a temple. It is also an arena where spirit and ego contend, where shadow and light wrestle for sovereignty. The Urantia Papers, papers 111 to 112, describe this struggle in terms of the relationship between the human mind and the indwelling thought adjuster. The adjuster whispers of eternal truth, gently guiding the soul toward alignment with the Father's will. Yet the mind, bound by ego and habit, resists. The adjuster seeks unity. The ego clings to fragmentation. The adjuster aims at light. The ego fears loss. And so, the kingdom must be chosen, not once, but daily, moment by moment, as each decision either opens the heart to God or closes it in self. Paul expressed this tension with brutal honesty. For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I do. Romans 7 verse 19. He knew that the struggle was not against distant enemies, but against the divided self. The heart yearns for God, yet the ego resists surrender. The soul longs for freedom, yet habit binds it. To live in the kingdom is to live in this paradox, to recognize that the greatest battles are fought not on fields of war, but in the conscience of a human heart. Jung offered another lens for this struggle, the confrontation with the shadow. The shadow is all that we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves, the denied fears, desires, wounds that we project onto others. Left unexamined, the shadow controls us, chaining us to illusion. But when faced, it becomes a doorway. Jung saw individuation, the process of becoming whole, as requiring us to meet the shadow, integrate it, and discover the self that transcends ego. In spiritual language, the shadow is the soil where the kingdom's seed must grow. The struggle is not to erase the shadow, but to transfigure it, to let light shine in hidden places. This interior battle is not evidence of failure, but proof of life. To struggle is to be alive to the tension between what is and what can be. Even the Buddha, before his enlightenment, faced illusion, desire, and fear beneath the Bodhi tree. His struggle was not external, but interior. To resist the temptation of illusion, to awaken from the dream of separation, to see clearly. In that moment of struggle, he discovered liberation, not by escaping humanity, but by embracing it with awakened eyes. The kingdom Jesus described is similar. It is not a path for those who avoid struggle, but for those who embrace it as the arena of transformation. The treasure discovered in the heart, chapter 2, is not won cheaply. It must be defended against fear, nourished against neglect, chosen against temptation. The temple, chapter 3, is radiant, but its silence must be guarded from the noise of ego. The struggle within is the price of freedom, but it is also the path to joy. This is why Jesus spoke of taking up the cross daily. The cross is not only external suffering. It is the inner surrender of self-will to divine will. It is the decision, repeated again and again, to choose love over fear, truth over illusion, fidelity over pride. The struggle within is the crucible where this surrender becomes real. It is painful, yes, but it is also liberating, for each surrender opens the heart more fully to the kingdom already dwelling within. And so, the kingdom is not promised as escape from struggle, but as meaning within it. The battle is not sign of absence, but of presence. If you feel torn, divided, restless, it is not because the kingdom has abandoned you. It is because it is near, pressing against the walls of ego, calling you into freedom. The struggle is not curse, but invitation, not proof of weakness, but of awakening. The struggle within is, at its core, the struggle between illusion and truth. The ego constructs elaborate defenses, weaving narratives of control, power, and security. It whispers that freedom is found in possession, that identity is secured in comparison, that safety lies in isolation. These illusions are persuasive because they mimic what the soul truly longs for: belonging, dignity, peace, but they offer only shadows of the real. The Urantia papers, paper 111, describe the adjuster's task as the constant effort to align the human will with the divine. Yet this alignment is not forced. The adjuster whispers, never coerces, guides, never compels. The ego, by contrast, is insistent, loud, immediate. It craves gratification now, while the adjuster points toward eternity. Thus, the human heart becomes the crossroads. Every thought, every act, every decision is a choice between the fleeting promises of ego and the quiet call of spirit. Paul knew this intimately. His confession, "I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I do," is not resignation but recognition of this universal tension. He acknowledges the split within the self, the will to serve God and the pull of habit, the yearning for truth and the inertia of sin. In this, Paul gives voice to every human being, for all feel the dissonance between who they long to be and who they often are. Jung described this dissonance as the encounter with the shadow. The shadow is not merely evil. It is everything unacknowledged: our fears, repressed desires, untamed instincts. Left unexamined, it manipulates from the dark, convincing us that our projections are reality. The ego prefers the shadow hidden, because to face it requires humility, vulnerability, and change. Yet Jung insisted that individuation demands this confrontation. Only by facing the shadow can the self, the wholeness aligned with God, emerge. Spirit does not deny the shadow, but redeems it, transforming what was once fear into depth, what was once wound into wisdom. Buddhist teaching parallels this with the concept of Maya, illusion. The unenlightened mind clings to appearances, mistaking them for ultimate reality. It believes permanence where there is transience, separation where there is unity, control where there is surrender. Awakening requires seeing through these illusions, recognizing them as mirages. The kingdom, like enlightenment, does not abolish life's forms, but reveals their transparency. To see clearly is to be free. The struggle, then, is not a curse, but a necessity. Without it, growth would be impossible. Freedom must be chosen, not inherited. Love must be embraced, not imposed. The adjuster calls, but the human will must consent. Each moment becomes a decision. Will I choose illusion or truth, ego or spirit, fear or love? This is the battlefield where destiny is shaped, not in grand gestures, but in daily choices, often hidden from the world yet known to God. The cost of choosing spirit is real. The ego resists, mourning its illusions. To surrender pride feels like death. To release control feels like loss. To embrace vulnerability feels like weakness. And yet, in the very act of surrender, the soul discovers freedom. The death of illusion becomes the birth of truth. The letting go of ego becomes the discovery of self. What feels like loss is revealed as gain. Thus, the struggle is holy. It is not evidence of failure, but proof of participation in the kingdom. Those who wrestle within are not abandoned. They're being shaped. The noise of ego may be loud, but the whisper of the adjuster is steady, patient, eternal. And though the struggle may continue throughout life, each choice for truth strengthens the soul. Each surrender to love enlarges the temple. Each step toward freedom deepens joy. The paradox of the inner struggle is that what feels like bondage is the very place where freedom is born. To confront the ego's illusions, to wrestle with the shadow, to stand at the crossroads of choice. This is not failure, but the path to liberation. The kingdom does not bypass this struggle. It is revealed through it. The Urantia Papers, Paper 112, emphasize that the adjuster's purpose is not to erase the human will, but to unify it with the divine. Freedom is not the absence of struggle, but the result of choosing alignment with God. The adjuster never forces consent, for coerced obedience is not love. Instead, the adjuster whispers, illuminates, beckons, inviting the human soul into partnership. This means that freedom is born not in passivity, but in active consent. To choose the kingdom is to choose the highest freedom, the freedom to love, to align, to become whole. Paul glimpsed this paradox when he cried out, "Who will rescue me from this body of death?" and answered, "Thanks be to God through Jesus Christ our Lord." His words reveal that freedom does not arise from self-effort alone, but from grace, from the discovery that the struggle itself is the place where God meets us. The battle within is not a closed circle of despair, but an open arena where divine strength enters human weakness. The very acknowledgement of our inability becomes the opening through which God's power flows. Jung saw this same truth in the integration of the shadow. To deny the shadow is to remain enslaved by it. To face it is to reclaim power. Individuation does not mean perfection, but wholeness, the acceptance of all parts of the self under the light of the self. In spiritual language, the kingdom does not demand the eradication of humanity, but its transfiguration. Freedom arises not from rejecting our humanity, but from surrendering it to God, allowing His light to permeate even the darkest corners. Buddhist teaching confirms this dynamic. Enlightenment is not escape from illusion, but awakening through it. The illusions of desire, fear, and separation do not vanish by denial, but by recognition. When one sees clearly, the illusion loses its grip. The kingdom functions the same way. Once the whisper is heard, the lie of ego is unmasked. The struggle remains, but it no longer enslaves, for the soul knows that truth is deeper than illusion. This is why the struggle is not wasted. Each decision for truth strengthens the soul's freedom. Each act of surrender engraves eternity into time. Each moment of fidelity becomes a stone in the temple of the kingdom. The struggle, repeated daily, shapes destiny, not only for this life, but for eternity. For as the Urantia Papers affirm, the adjuster is preparing the soul for fusion, for eternal union with God. The choices made in the arena of conscience ripple into the destiny of the soul itself. Freedom, then, is not abstract. It is lived in decisions, to forgive rather than resent, to trust rather than despair, to love rather than fear. These choices may seem small, invisible to others, yet they carry eternal weight. The kingdom is not built in grand gestures, but in these hidden acts of fidelity. Each time the soul chooses spirit over ego, it grows freer, stronger, more radiant. Each time it chooses otherwise, it delays but does not destroy, for the adjuster remains patient, never abandoning, always calling. Thus, the struggle within is not only a battlefield, but a school. It teaches us what freedom is and what it costs. It teaches us that love is stronger than fear, that surrender is stronger than pride, that silence is stronger than noise. And it teaches us that the kingdom is not given cheaply, but discovered in fidelity. The struggle is painful, but the joy it yields surpasses the cost. For in choosing the kingdom, the soul discovers its true home, and nothing can take that away. The struggle within is not a detour on the path of the kingdom. It is the path itself. To live as a child of God is not to escape conflict, but to engage it with courage. guided by the whisper of the adjuster. Every moment of resistance, every confrontation with the shadow, every battle between ego and spirit is part of the sacred journey. The kingdom is not found by avoiding the struggle, but by walking through it, trusting that God's presence is steadfast even when our will falters. The Urantia papers remind us that this daily wrestling is the school of eternity. Paper 112 speaks of mortal life as the arena where decisions of time prepare the soul for destiny beyond time. The choices we make, often hidden, unseen, unnoticed, are shaping the eternal character of the soul. Each act of faith, each surrender to truth, each embrace of love weaves our being into harmony with God. The battlefield of the heart is where eternity is chosen. This truth reframes the meaning of weakness. To feel torn is not proof of abandonment, but of participation. If you struggle, it is because the kingdom is alive within you, pressing against illusion. The ego resists most fiercely where the spirit is closest to victory. What feels like darkness may be the shadow cast by approaching light. Even failure can be transformed. For every return to God, every act of repentance, every cry for help becomes another step toward freedom. The struggle does not disqualify us, it initiates us. Paul's testimony becomes here a beacon of hope. His admission, "I do not do the good I want," does not end in despair but in gratitude. Thanks be to God through Jesus Christ our Lord. The battle is real, but grace is greater. The kingdom is not won by human strength alone, but by partnership with the divine. The adjuster does not abandon us to fight alone. He fights with us, whispers through us, strengthens us when we are weak. The struggle is ours, but the victory is God's. Jung's vision of individuation echoes this. Wholeness emerges not by erasing conflict, but by integrating it. The shadow, once faced, becomes energy for growth. Likewise, in the kingdom, the places of greatest resistance become the soil for deepest transformation. Where fear once ruled, courage blooms. Where pride once blinded, humility shines. Where illusion once bound, truth liberates. The very battlefield becomes altar. The struggle becomes sacrament. Buddhism, too, assures us that awakening is possible. The illusions of the mind may seem endless, but the light of awareness dispels them. Each moment of mindfulness weakens the chains of illusion. In the same way, each moment of choosing the kingdom weakens the hold of ego. Freedom is not achieved once for all, but chosen again and again, like breath, like heartbeat, until it becomes the natural rhythm of the soul. Thus, the struggle is not endless futility, but progressive liberation. Every choice for love expands freedom. Every act of surrender engraves eternity more deeply into the soul. The kingdom is not a distant reward, but a present reality growing stronger each time we choose it. And though the struggle may accompany us until the end of mortal life, it is not the final word. Beyond the battlefield lies union. Beyond the shadow lies light. Beyond the struggle lies freedom eternal. This is the hope, that the kingdom within is stronger than the ego, that light is stronger than darkness, that grace is stronger than failure. The adjuster whispers, the Christ guides, the Spirit strengthens. You are not abandoned in the struggle. You are accompanied, upheld, loved. And each time you choose the kingdom, you take one more step into the eternal freedom for which you were created. The struggle within, then, is not only battle, but blessing. It teaches us that freedom is real, that choice matters, that God is near. It reminds us that we are not passive victims, but active participants in our destiny. and it assures us that even in the midst of conflict, the kingdom is here, hidden, growing, whispering, calling us home. There is a silence so profound that within it the eternal speaks. It is not the silence of absence, but of presence, not emptiness, but fullness. This silence is the dwelling place of the adjuster, the fragment of God that lives within the human soul. Hidden, gentle, constant, the adjuster is the Father's voice in miniature, the living seed of eternity planted in the soil of time. The Urantia papers 107 to 112, describe this fragment as the most astonishing mystery of all creation, that the infinite Father, beyond space and time, chooses to dwell within mortal beings, not as a distant overseer, not as a mechanical influence, but as a personal guide, whispering truth in the intimacy of conscience. The adjuster does not thunder, he whispers. He does not impose, he invites. His presence is quiet yet transformative, like yeast that leavens the whole dough, like a spark that, once sheltered, becomes fire. The Quaker mystics called this presence the inner light. They testified that in the stillness of gathered silence, one could hear the voice of God within, speaking not in words but in impressions, urgings, illuminations. For them, the inner light was not metaphor, but reality. Guidance as sure as scripture, more immediate than ritual. In this recognition, they touched a truth parallel to Urantia's teaching, that God himself, through his fragment, dwells in every soul, waiting for consent, longing for communion. Plotinus, centuries before, spoke of a similar mystery. He described the soul as bearing within itself a spark, a trace of the One, forever drawing it upward. This spark was not external influence, but the very essence of the soul's longing for union. To turn inward was to discover ascent, for the divine presence was not far, but hidden within. The adjuster is this spark, yet more, not only a trace of the One, but the living presence of the Father himself, guiding, shaping, loving. And the Christian mystics gave voice to this same paradox. They spoke of the still, small voice, of the God who is closer to us than we are to ourselves. Meister Eckhart urged souls to find God in the ground of their being, where silence gives birth to word. Teresa of Avila described the innermost chamber of the soul's castle, where Christ himself dwells as friend and guide. The adjuster is the substance behind these metaphors, not imagination, not projection, but a real indwelling of the eternal in the finite. Yet this voice is not always heard easily. It is soft, often drowned out by noise of the world, noise of the ego, noise of fear. To hear it requires stillness, attentiveness, willingness to be led. The adjuster does not flatter, nor does he scold with harshness. His language is clarity, his tone is patience, his call is always toward truth, always toward love. He does not answer every curiosity, nor satisfy every demand. Instead, he whispers the next step, the deeper alignment, the invitation to become more than what we have been. And herein lies the miracle. The adjuster is not distant divinity looking down upon humanity, but divinity walking within humanity. To acknowledge his presence is to realize that God is not elsewhere. The kingdom is not merely promised, it is present. The adjuster is the kingdom's ambassador, already dwelling within, waiting only for recognition. The whisper is there, even now, in every soul. It waits for stillness to be heard. The adjuster does not command, he guides. His language is not thunder, but whisper, not decree, but suggestion, not compulsion, but invitation. In this lies the dignity of human freedom, that God himself, dwelling within, chooses persuasion over force, love over domination. The adjuster respects the sovereignty of human will even as he longs to bring it into harmony with divine will. The Urantia Papers, Paper 110, emphasize this delicacy. The adjuster is ever working, but always through the avenue of consent. He places before the soul glimpses of truth, flashes of clarity, subtle nudges that shift perspective. He does not remove the necessity of decision, but dignifies it. For it is only in choosing that love becomes real, and only in freedom that the soul becomes eternal. The Quakers understood this when they spoke of the inward teacher. For them, the inner light was not a distant doctrine, but an immediate guide. They testified that when the heart is still, when silence is embraced, the teacher speaks, sometimes in conviction, sometimes in peace, always in truth. They learned that the voice of God is not always what the ego wishes to hear, but it is always what the soul most deeply needs. To follow this voice is to walk the narrow way of truth, a path that brings freedom even when it brings challenge. Plotinus described this process in philosophical terms. The spark within, he said, calls the soul upward, away from the fragmented distractions of the senses, toward unity with the One. Yet this ascent is not automatic. It requires turning inward, choosing again and again to let go of illusion. In the same way, the adjuster whispers not once, but continually, always calling, always inviting, never ceasing until the soul consents. Christian mystics also bore witness to this dynamic. John of the Cross spoke of God as the gentle breeze that passes unnoticed by those distracted, but unmistakable to the attentive heart. Catherine of Siena declared that God speaks most clearly in the cell of self-knowledge, where one learns to distinguish between the false voice of pride and the true voice of love. Their wisdom echoes Urantia's teaching. The adjuster's voice is discerned not in noise but in stillness, not in pride but in humility, not in demand but in surrender. This guidance is not abstract. It appears in conscience, in sudden awareness that one path is luminous while another is dark. It surfaces in the inner resistance felt when tempted towards selfishness, in the quiet joy that accompanies acts of kindness, in the restlessness that stirs when one strays from truth. The adjuster is not content to remain passive observer. He acts, but always gently, always respecting freedom. He is the compass of the kingdom, pointing toward true north even when the soul wanders. Yet, as every seeker knows, discernment is not always easy. The ego, loud and insistent, often mimics the voice of spirit. Fear disguises itself as prudence. Pride cloaks itself as conviction. Desire masquerades as inspiration. To distinguish the whisper of the adjuster from the noise of the ego requires patience, humility, and practice. It is learned through prayer, through meditation, through repeated listening until the soul recognizes the tone of truth. Like a friend whose voice becomes unmistakable over time, the adjuster's whisper becomes familiar to the attentive heart. And here is the paradox. Though the adjuster is fragment of God himself, his voice is often experienced as our truest self speaking. The soul, touched by his guidance, recognizes truth not as foreign, but as homecoming. It feels like remembrance, as though one is recalling what was always known but forgotten. This is why Jesus said, "The kingdom is within you." The adjuster's voice is not alien command, but the unveiling of who we truly are in God. The adjuster's voice is not only a compass for daily decisions, it is the architect of eternity. Each whisper, each nudge, each illumination is part of a greater design, shaping the soul for its ultimate destiny, union with God. What feels like a fleeting impression in time carries weight beyond time, for the adjuster works always with eternity in view. The Urantia papers 110 to 112, describe the adjuster as tirelessly laboring to spiritualize the human mind, preparing it for fusion, the eternal blending of human personality with divine fragment. This is not a symbolic union, but a literal one, the moment when the creature and the creator become inseparably one. Every whisper of conscience, every call toward love, every tug toward truth is a thread in this tapestry of destiny. The adjuster's guidance is not random. It is purposeful, weaving the soul into readiness for the day when it will shine with undivided light. This perspective transforms how we see the struggle of life. Decisions that seem small, a moment of honesty, an act of forgiveness, a step toward compassion, are not trivial. They are the raw material of eternity. Each time the soul consents to the adjuster's guidance, it shapes itself more closely to God's image. Each time it resists, the process slows but does not stop, for the adjuster never withdraws, never tires, never ceases. The Father is infinitely patient, waiting for consent, working with every fragment of openness to draw the soul homeward. Plotinus saw a similar dynamic when he spoke of the soul's ascent. The spark within, he said, calls us ever upward, urging us to shed the illusions that bind us and to embrace unity with the One. He believed that the destiny of the soul was to return to its source, to rest in the good that gave it being. The adjuster fulfills this intuition, revealing that the spark is not only a memory of origin, but the living presence of the Father himself, guiding the soul toward its eternal consummation. Christian mystics spoke in parallel images. They described the journey of the soul as a marriage, a union of love so complete that the two become one. John of the Cross spoke of the spiritual marriage, in which the soul rests entirely in God, no longer divided, no longer striving, but fully surrendered. The adjuster's voice is the bridegroom's call, preparing the soul for this wedding of time and eternity. Every whisper is rehearsal, every consent a step closer to the union that fulfills all longing. The Quakers, too, testified to this destiny. For them, the inner light was not only guidance for the present, but the assurance of eternal communion. They believed that to follow the light was to live already in the kingdom, to walk already in eternity. They sensed that the voice within was not temporary comfort, but everlasting companion, the one who would lead them through death itself into life without end. And indeed, this is the adjuster's ultimate promise, that death is not the end, that the voice will not be silenced. The adjuster walks with the soul beyond the grave, carrying memory, identity, and destiny into the worlds to come. The guidance that began in whispers will culminate in fusion, when creature and creator share a single will, a single purpose, a single life. This is the consummation of the kingdom, the transformation of mortal into immortal, of fragment into fullness, of seeker into son. The adjuster's voice, then, is not only moral compass or spiritual encouragement. It is the very thread of eternal destiny. To listen is to live already in the light of eternity. To consent is to step into freedom that no shadow can undo. And to follow is to walk a path that leads not into nothingness, but into union with the infinite. The whisper of the adjuster is not an ornament to life, it is its essence. To ignore it is to wander in circles, to live only on the surface. To attend to it is to discover depth, to walk in the kingdom, to live already in eternity while still within time. The adjuster is the voice of the Father, not above us, but within us, the kingdom's herald sounding from the temple of the heart. The Urantia papers affirm this astonishing truth, that every human being, regardless of condition or circumstance, carries within a fragment of God Himself. This is not metaphor but fact, not sentiment but reality. The infinite has chosen to dwell in the finite, to guide each soul personally, to lead it from darkness to light, from time into eternity. To recognize this presence is to awaken to the kingdom already within. The mystics across centuries knew this secret. The Quakers spoke of the inner light, urging all to attend to it with reverence. Plotinus called it the spark of the one, pulling the soul upward. Christian saints testified that God is closer to us than we are to ourselves. Each, in their own language, pointed to the same reality. The adjuster's voice is not distant, not foreign, but the truest voice of the self aligned with God. To listen is to be changed, not by sudden spectacle, but by quiet transformation. The whisper leads us step by step, to forgive when resentment burns, to trust when fear tightens, to love when indifference tempts. These choices are the kingdom embodied. They're not abstract ideals, but concrete acts, the daily liturgy of living in God's presence. Each act of fidelity strengthens the soul. Each moment of consent brings eternity closer. And yet, the adjuster's voice is not only for this life. It is preparation for union beyond death. Every whisper is rehearsal for the day of fusion, when human will and divine will merge into one. The kingdom is both now and not yet. Now in the presence of the adjuster, not yet in the fullness of union. But every moment of listening is anticipation. Every act of surrender is foretaste. Every step of fidelity is seed of immortality. This, then, is the invitation to live as though eternity were already here. To let the adjuster's whisper be not background noise, but guiding melody. To attend not to the clamor of ego, but to the song of the Spirit. To shape one's life not by fear, but by trust. Not by illusion, but by truth. Not by self-will, but by divine love. And the promise is sure. Though the whisper may seem faint, though the ego may roar, the adjuster does not leave. He is faithful when we falter, patient when we delay, gentle when we resist. He is the eternal presence of the Father, carrying us even when we stumble, guiding us even when we are blind. His voice will not cease until the journey is complete, until the fragment becomes one with the source. To live, then, is to choose. To listen or to ignore, to open or to close, to walk in the kingdom or to remain outside. The adjuster whispers, but the will decides. And in every act of listening, the kingdom grows. In every act of consent, eternity shines brighter. So enter the silence. Listen for the whisper. Let your heart become the temple where God speaks, where the kingdom dwells, where eternity is born. For the adjuster's voice is the voice of the Father Himself, and to hear it is to live forever. Religion often appears to human eyes as something reserved for temples, rituals, and sacred hours. Yet the kingdom Jesus proclaimed, and the Urantia papers affirm, was not meant to be confined to one place or time. It was to be lived. It was to transform ordinary days into sacred days, ordinary acts into holy acts. The kingdom, if truly within, must spill outward, touching the simplest gestures, sanctifying the common, transfiguring the routine. In paper 140, the Urantia Book recounts the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus reframed life itself as liturgy. The Beatitudes were not distant promises, but living truths for every moment. Blessed are the meek, blessed are the merciful, blessed are those who hunger for righteousness. This was not philosophy alone, it was instruction for daily living. The kingdom was not to be awaited, but enacted. The way one spoke, forgave, worked, ate, and even suffered became the very stage where God's presence could be revealed. Later, in paper 180, as Jesus spoke at the Last Supper, he made this truth unmistakable. He told his followers that love, embodied, enacted, lived, was the sign of discipleship. By this, he said, shall all men know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. The table became altar, the bread became symbol, the shared cup became reminder. But what he asked was not confined to that night. It was that all life be lived as table, as bread broken, as wine shared. Here lies the radical shift. Liturgy is not escape from life, but the sanctification of life itself. To breathe with awareness, to work with integrity, to love with fidelity. These are sacraments as holy as any ritual. The kingdom's altar is not only in cathedrals, but in kitchens, workplaces, marketplaces, hospitals, and streets. Every space is sanctuary when inhabited with presence. This insight resonates with Viktor Frankl's testimony. Amid the horrors of the concentration camps, stripped of freedom and dignity, he discovered that meaning could be found even there. The one freedom that remained was the freedom to choose one's attitude, to give even suffering a meaning. In this choice, suffering itself could become liturgy. Frankl showed that even in the darkest places, life could be lived as offering, as active fidelity to what is higher than pain. This is the spirit of the daily liturgy, to discover meaning not apart from life's trials, but within them. The Buddhists express a parallel wisdom in the practice of mindfulness. To walk with awareness, to eat with attention, to breathe consciously. These are acts of presence that transform the ordinary into extraordinary. The kingdom's daily liturgy is similar. It is to live attentively, to see God in the unnoticed, to treat each moment as sacred. A sip of water, a word of kindness, a pause of silence, all become sacraments when approached with awareness of the eternal dwelling within. Rumi sang of this truth in poetry. He saw the mundane as stage of the sacred, the kitchen as holy as the mosque, the dance of daily tasks as dance of divine love. There are 1,000 ways to kneel and kiss the ground, he wrote. The daily liturgy is this multiplicity, that every gesture can bow, every act can worship, every breath can become prayer. The kingdom is not restricted to ritual gestures, but revealed in the way we wash dishes, greet strangers, bear burdens, and celebrate joys. To live the daily liturgy, then, is to accept that no act is too small to carry eternity. It is to recognize that God is present in the ordinary, and that fidelity is proven not in rare heroics, but in steady, quiet acts of presence. This is the kingdom as Jesus taught it. Not distant heaven, but heaven breaking into earth through human hearts that choose love in the simplest of ways. The sacred does not wait for grand moments. It hides itself in the common, in the rhythm of daily life, in the tasks so ordinary that we risk overlooking them. The Urantia papers, paper 140, remind us that Jesus never separated life into sacred and profane categories. To him, every act could reveal the kingdom if lived in love. He did not despise labor, meals, or rest. Instead, he sanctified them, showing that faithfulness in the small is as holy as triumph in the great. This truth is nowhere more radiant than the face of suffering. Paper 180 records Jesus at the Last Supper speaking of love as the ultimate mark of discipleship. Yet he spoke these words knowing the cross awaited him. The liturgy of daily life, then, includes not only joy but also anguish. To transform suffering into offering is perhaps the deepest sacrament of all. In this sense, the altar is found not only in feasts but in wounds, not only in bread shared but in tears endured with faith. Viktor Frankl bore witness to this paradox. Stripped of freedom, health, and dignity, he discovered that even in the midst of degradation, one could live liturgically by giving meaning to suffering. He told of prisoners who shared their last piece of bread, who offered comfort to others though they themselves despaired. These acts did not erase pain, but transfigured it. They proved that no condition is too dark for light, no moment too small for eternity. The kingdom breaks into the world not when suffering is avoided, but when suffering is inhabited with meaning and fidelity. The Buddhists have long taught that suffering itself can be a teacher. Mindfulness does not demand escape from pain, but attention within it. When one sits with suffering, breathing through it, not resisting or denying, the experience is transformed. The pain remains, but the relationship to it changes. It becomes space for clarity, compassion, and release. In this way, even anguish becomes a kind of liturgy, a place where presence is cultivated, where the kingdom whispers even in tears. Rumi gave this wisdom poetic voice. He urged his listeners to welcome every guest into the house of the soul, even sorrow, even grief, as messengers of the unseen. The wound, he wrote, is the place where the light enters you. In this view, daily liturgy includes not only joy, but also brokenness. The kingdom is not revealed despite wounds, but through them. To accept this is to allow life itself, in all its contrasts, to become temple. Yet the daily liturgy is not limited to suffering. It unfolds also in the smallest tasks: washing hands, preparing meals, sweeping floors. These actions, when done with awareness and love, cease to be merely functional. They become prayer. The monastics understood this when they spoke of ora et labora, prayer and work, as inseparable. But this truth extends beyond monasteries. Every life, no matter how simple, can become a monastery of the heart. The adjuster within makes every act capable of holiness. Thus, the kingdom's liturgy is accessible to all. One need not hold wealth, position, or learn to live it. The child who speaks truth, the mother who forgives, the worker who labors with integrity, all are celebrants of this hidden Massachusetts fidelity. Not circumstance determines holiness. The daily liturgy is democratized. Every soul is priest. Every life is altar. Every act is potential offering. The invitation is simple yet profound. Live as if every moment matters, because it does. Nothing is wasted when offered to God. Every gesture, whether laughter or lament, labor or rest, can become sacrament when infused with presence and love. To live this way is to make of one's days a continuous prayer, one's life a flowing liturgy, one's being a living sanctuary of the kingdom. The daily liturgy is never merely private. While the adjuster whispers within each heart, the fruits of this listening inevitably overflow into relationships, communities, and the wider world. The kingdom Jesus envisioned was never solitary. It was fellowship, communion, a collective reality born from many hearts choosing presence and fidelity. The Urantia Papers, paper 180, capture this beautifully in Jesus' words at the Last Supper. Love one another as I have loved you. This was not instruction for private devotion only, but a command to create a new kind of community. The disciples were not to retreat into isolation. They were to embody the kingdom together. Love, lived daily in concrete acts, was to be their liturgy. Sharing bread, carrying burdens, forgiving faults. These were the rituals that made them recognizable as children of the Father. This communal dimension reframes how we see ordinary acts. A smile to a stranger, a word of kindness to a coworker, patience with a child. These gestures, though small, ripple outward, shaping the invisible fabric of community. The kingdom is woven not in grand declarations, but in these subtle threads of fidelity. The daily liturgy is collective. It binds people together, heals divisions, and makes of diverse lives one body. Viktor Frankl observed this in the camps. He wrote not only of solitary meaning, but of how human dignity was preserved in relationships. The prisoner who shared his last crust of bread gave not only sustenance, but hope. The one who encouraged another to endure created meaning beyond himself. Even in the harshest conditions, liturgy became communal. It was the exchange of love that preserved the flame of humanity. Buddhism echoes this truth in the teaching of interbeing. To be mindful is not only to dwell in one's own breath, but to realize that breath itself is shared. That air, food, and life are sustained by countless beings. Daily awareness reveals that we are not isolated but interwoven. Thus, the liturgy of mindfulness expands into compassion, for to harm another is to harm oneself, and to serve another is to honor the whole. Rumi, too, sang of this communion. He wrote of the circle of dervishes, turning in harmony, each movement feeding the other, all becoming one dance. For him, life's daily rhythm was sacred precisely because it was shared. He saw the divine not only in solitary ecstasy, but in the laughter, tears, and labor of community. Be like a lamp, or a lifeboat, or a ladder, he urged, images of service that show how daily liturgy shines outward, guiding and lifting others. Thus, the kingdom is enacted not only in private silence, but in public love. The adjuster speaks in the inner temple, but his voice seeks embodiment in the common good. The daily liturgy, lived faithfully, builds the invisible cathedral of the kingdom on earth, a structure not of stone, but of human lives aligned with love. This also means that failures in love are not trivial. Harsh words, careless neglect, acts of indifference. They fracture the liturgy, interrupting the flow of sacred presence. Yet even here, grace abounds, for every failure can be redeemed through forgiveness. To forgive is itself a liturgical act, restoring the broken rhythm of community. In this sense, reconciliation is one of the highest sacraments of daily life, for it reweaves what has been torn. The kingdom grows where the daily liturgy is lived collectively. Homes become sanctuaries, workplaces become fields of fidelity, communities become reflections of eternity. The altar is set not only in solitary prayer, but in shared meals, common struggles, collective dreams. Every act of love expands the kingdom outward until it becomes not only inner reality, but communal presence, visible and transformative. To live the daily liturgy is to awaken to the truth that all of life is sacred ground. There is no gesture too small, no space too ordinary, no hour too common to carry the presence of God. The adjuster whispers not only in prayer, but in labor, not only in ecstasy, but in fatigue, not only in silence, but in conversation. The kingdom is not elsewhere. It is here, embodied in fidelity to love at every moment. The Urantia Papers, papers 140 and 180, reveal that Jesus taught this with his very life. He worked with his hands, he shared meals, he walked dusty roads, he comforted friends and strangers alike. He showed that holiness is not a matter of withdrawing from the world, but of transfiguring it from within. His final command, that love be the mark of his disciples, summarized this daily liturgy. Love is not occasional, it is continuous. It is not confined to sanctuaries, it sanctifies all of life. Viktor Frankl's testimony sharpens this insight. In conditions of utter deprivation, he discovered that meaning could still be chosen. This freedom of response, this capacity to live with dignity even when dignity is stripped away, is itself liturgy. It proves that no force can erase the sacred when the soul consents to give suffering meaning. To live this way is to turn even anguish into offering, to allow the kingdom to shine through wounds as well as joys. The Buddhists invite us to a similar awareness, to dwell fully in the present, attentive to breath, to gesture, to encounter. This mindfulness reveals that the ordinary is already extraordinary, if only we are present to it. The daily liturgy is mindfulness expanded, not only attention to self, but attention to God within, and to others as bearers of the same sacred presence. Each act becomes prayer because each act is lived with awareness. Rumi's poetry sings this vision with passion. There are 1,000 ways to kneel and kiss the ground. Every step, every task, every embrace can be prayer. The dance of life itself becomes a dance of love when entered with presence. The kingdom is not a distant spectacle, but a rhythm beneath the ordinary, waiting for us to join. Thus, the daily liturgy is not only personal but cosmic. Each act of fidelity echoes across the fabric of reality. Each choice for love strengthens the kingdom's presence on earth. Each small offering, kindness, forgiveness, patience, service, is a stone in the invisible cathedral God is building through human lives. The kingdom does not descend ready-made. It grows from within through the daily liturgy of countless souls saying yes to love. The invitation, then, is simple but radical. Live as if every act were sacrament. Wash dishes as if you're washing feet. Speak as if every word were a prayer. Work as if labor were altar. Suffer as if every tear were incense. Love as if every embrace were eternal. To live this way is to transform existence itself into liturgy, to make of one's life a seamless mass where every moment is communion. And this is the promise. The adjuster within blesses every act offered in love. No effort is wasted, no fidelity forgotten, no gesture unseen. Each becomes part of the eternal story, woven into the soul's destiny, carried forward into the worlds to come. The daily liturgy, humble and hidden, prepares us for the eternal liturgy of union with God. So let life itself be altar. Let every act be prayer. Let every moment shine with the presence of the kingdom. For the daily liturgy is nothing less than the kingdom lived, here, now, in the sacred ordinary that reveals eternity. The kingdom of God is profoundly personal. It calls each heart by name, dwells within each soul as the adjuster's whisper, and demands a personal response. Yet the kingdom is never solitary. To encounter the divine within is to discover the divine among, to awaken not only to God but to others. The kingdom is a communion, a fraternity cosmic in scope and intimate in form. The Urantia papers, paper 170, emphasize this paradox. The kingdom, they say, is within the soul but expressed in relationships. It is not built by institutions alone, nor destroyed by them. It is alive wherever love binds lives together. The papers insist that Jesus' message was never about individual escape, but about community transformation. To be in the kingdom is to belong to God, to truth, to one another. This is why Jesus spoke so often of brotherhood. He called God Father, not as distant metaphor, but to reveal the family bond uniting all creatures. If God is Father, then every human being is brother or sister. The kingdom is the realization of this truth, not theory, but lived reality. To pray, Our Father, is to embrace communion. It is to recognize that no soul stands alone, that salvation is never isolation, but fellowship. The Zoroastrian tradition offers a parallel in its vision of Asha, the principle of truth, order, and righteousness that binds cosmos and community. To live in Asha is to live in harmony with divine law and with others, building not only personal virtue, but communal justice. This vision resonates with the kingdom's liturgy. Fidelity to God is fidelity to one another. Communion is not sentiment, but cosmic order, woven into the fabric of existence. Teilhard de Chardin, centuries later, envisioned the new sphere, the sphere of human consciousness evolving toward unity. He saw history as movement toward convergence, humanity awakening into collective awareness of its shared destiny in God. His vision echoes the Urantia teaching. The kingdom is not collapse of individuality, but fulfillment of it in communion. The adjuster speaks within, but the spirit of truth binds across, weaving lives into a collective tapestry of love. The Acts of the Apostles bear witness to this lived reality. The early community shared meals, possessions, prayers, and hopes. Their communion was not utopia, but fidelity. They remained flawed, yet their love created a new kind of society. Their daily liturgy was not only personal prayer, but shared bread, mutual support, collective mission. The kingdom was visible not only in silence, but in fellowship. This is the mystery of communion. To belong to God is to belong to others. The inner temple, chapter 3, expands in a shared sanctuary. The daily liturgy, chapter 6, unfolds into communal rhythm. The kingdom reveals itself not in isolation, but in relationship, not in withdrawal, but in encounter. To ignore one's brother is to mute the adjuster's voice. To embrace one's sister is to hear it amplified. Thus, the kingdom is both deeply intimate and gloriously communal. It honors individuality, yet transcends it. It whispers in solitude, yet sings in fellowship. It is personal salvation, yes, but salvation that expands into communion, fraternity, shared life. The adjuster dwells within, but the Spirit binds across, making of many one body, one family, one kingdom. Communion is not abstract. It takes form in the way people live together, care for one another, and recognize their shared destiny. The Urantia Papers, paper 171, emphasize that Jesus' message of the kingdom was always relational. He did not envision solitary mystics retreating from society, but communities of love, woven together by mutual service. The kingdom's authenticity is tested not in theory, but in the way it transforms human relationships. The Acts of the Apostles preserve glimpses of this reality. The early believers, filled with the Spirit, shared possessions, broke bread daily, and prayed together. They were not united by uniformity, but by love, a force stronger than fear or division. Their communion was imperfect, fragile, often strained by human weakness, yet it was real. It proved that when the kingdom takes root in hearts, it inevitably grows outward into fellowship. Zoroastrianism speaks of Asha, truth and cosmic order, as something lived communally. To dwell in Asha is to participate in a moral universe where righteousness is not individual achievement, but collective harmony. This resonates with Jesus' vision. To live the kingdom is to align not only with God, but with each other, to create a space where love orders life, where justice flows, where fellowship flourishes. Communion is cosmic law translated into human bonds. Teilhard de Chardin expanded this insight on a global scale. He believed that humanity, through the new sphere, was being drawn into deeper interconnection, a web of thought, culture, and spirit converging toward the omega point, the fullness of union in Christ. Though Teilhard spoke as a scientist mystic, his vision parallels Urantia's message, that the kingdom is not collapse of individuality, but fulfillment of it in unity. Each adjuster whispers uniquely, but the spirit of truth harmonizes collectively. Communion is the destiny toward which all creation moves. Concrete communion begins in simple acts: sharing food, offering encouragement, forgiving offense. These gestures, repeated daily, weave an invisible fabric that sustains communities. To visit the sick, to welcome the stranger, to lift up the discouraged. These are not peripheral acts of charity, but central liturgy of the kingdom. They enact the truth that no soul is isolated, that every life is bound to others. Frankel's witness in the camps also speaks here. He recalled not only solitary meaning, but shared meaning. The way men encouraged one another, the way they gave hope when despair threatened to consume. Communion was sometimes no more than a glance of solidarity, a whispered word, a shared silence. Yet in those moments, dignity was preserved, and the kingdom flickered even in darkness. Buddhism reminds us of interdependence in every breath. To drink a cup of tea is to partake of rain, sun, earth, farmer, potter, and countless others. Communion is not something created artificially. It is recognition of a truth already there, that life is interwoven. The kingdom, then, is awakening to this inter-being, seeing in every other person a reflection of the divine presence we also carry. Rumi's words echo this joy of shared existence. He called humanity to gather in circles of love, to celebrate diversity as part of the divine dance. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, he wrote, "There is a field. I'll meet you there." This field is communion, the space where the kingdom becomes visible as fellowship transcending judgment, hierarchy, and fear. Thus, communion is the fruit of the kingdom and its proof. A solitary mystic may feel divine presence, but if that presence does not lead to love of others, it is incomplete. The adjuster whispers within, but the whisper is fulfilled in shared life. The daily liturgy, chapter 6, expands into collective rhythm here. Life together becomes sacrament, fellowship becomes altar, love becomes law. The kingdom's communion is not limited by geography, tribe, or even planet. To belong to God is to belong to the entire family of creation. This is why the Urantia Papers, paper 170, emphasize that the kingdom is a spiritual fraternity, transcending boundaries of race, nation, and creed. It is rooted in the recognition that all souls share the same Father, and therefore are eternally bound to one another. The vision stretches beyond the human family into cosmic fraternity. If the adjuster is fragment of God himself, then every person is a bearer of eternity. To live in communion is to recognize that in each other we encounter not only fellow mortals, but fellow vessels of divinity. This makes of every relationship something cosmic in scope. Love of neighbor is no longer sentimental advice. It is participation in eternal reality. Teilhard de Chardin's new sphere gives language to this expansion. He saw human consciousness evolving toward unity, not collapse of individuality, but convergence into a collective consciousness illumined by Christ. The new sphere is a sign that communion is written into the very structure of evolution. The kingdom, then, is not an afterthought, but the goal of history. Creation itself awakening into cosmic fellowship. The Acts of the Apostles foreshadowed this truth. The disciples, once confined to Jerusalem, soon discovered that the Spirit compelled them outward, into Samaria, Antioch, Rome, and beyond. What began as fellowship among a few became fellowship for the world. The Spirit's fire erased boundaries, making communion universal. Every table could become altar, every culture a vessel, every person a brother or sister. Zoroastrianism anticipated this cosmic scope in its vision of Asha. Order and truth were not confined to a tribe, but pervaded the cosmos. To dwell in Asha was to align with universal harmony, to take one's place in the cosmic symphony. This harmony extended into community, but did not stop there. It was woven into the stars, binding humanity to the whole of creation. The kingdom as communion carries this same vision. To live in love is to be in tune with the order of the cosmos itself. The Buddhists also bear witness. Their teaching of interbeing declares that no being exists alone. To harm one is to harm all. To bless one is to bless all. The kingdom's communion echoes this reality. It is not selective, but all-encompassing. It asks us to see not only family, friends, or tribe as sacred, but every life, every creature, every fragment of creation. Communion is cosmic. The kingdom's family includes all who share breath and all who share spirit. Rumi's poetry turns this cosmic vision into song. He saw love as the thread binding galaxies, the music underlying existence, the field where all differences dissolve. "Stop acting so small," he wrote. "You are the universe in ecstatic motion." Communion in this sense is not reduction, but expansion, to realize that in loving one another we are participating in the cosmic dance itself. Thus, the kingdom as communion expands outward like ripples on water. It begins in the soul, flows into relationships, expands into community, and finally embraces the universe. To awaken to this truth is to recognize that every act of love reverberates across eternity, strengthening the bonds not only among people, but within creation itself. Each gesture of compassion is a cosmic act, each forgiveness a contribution to universal harmony, each prayer a thread woven into the eternal tapestry. This is the grandeur of the kingdom. It is not only salvation for the individual, but communion for the cosmos. It binds together what pride divides, heals what hatred fractures, unites what fear scatters. To live in the kingdom is to live already in this cosmic fraternity, to walk as citizen not of a nation only, but of a universe held together by love. To say that the kingdom is communion is to say that it is the deepest truth of existence. No one stands alone. No soul is isolated. The adjuster within each person is a reminder that God Himself has chosen to dwell in fellowship with us. And that same choice calls us to dwell in fellowship with one another. The kingdom is never a solitary treasure hoarded within the heart. It is a light meant to be shared, a fire that grows brighter when joined to other flames. The Urantia Papers, paper 170, affirm this vision. The kingdom is not built through creed or institution alone, but in the living bonds of love between souls. It is wherever the fatherhood of God is acknowledged and the brotherhood of humanity embraced. This truth expands endlessly. Family into community, community into humanity, humanity into cosmic fraternity. The kingdom is not an exclusive circle, but an ever-widening embrace. This is why the Acts of the Apostles show the disciples breaking bread together, sharing resources, forgiving offenses, and carrying one another's burdens. They discovered that the Spirit made them more than companions. It made them kin. Their fellowship was imperfect, yes, but it was real, and in that realness the kingdom was visible. Communion is not about perfection, but about fidelity, choosing again and again to live as one family in God. Teilhard de Chardin helps us glimpse the cosmic scale of this truth. The noosphere, that living web of human consciousness converging toward union, reveals that communion is not accidental but destiny. Creation itself moves toward synthesis, toward harmony, toward the omega point in Christ. To live in the kingdom is to cooperate with this movement, to allow one's life to become thread in the great tapestry of cosmic love. Zoroastrian wisdom resonates here too. To dwell in Asha is to live in alignment with truth, not only as individual, but as part of a greater order. Communion is not only desirable, it is law inscribed into the cosmos. Disorder isolates, harmony unites. The kingdom as communion is participation in this eternal harmony, in which love is the measure of truth and brotherhood the expression of fidelity. And the poets have always known this. Rumi's call to meet in the field beyond right and wrong, beyond division and fear, is a summons to communion. He saw that the kingdom is not realized in arguments won, but in love shared. Communion is not uniformity, it is harmony. It does not erase difference, it transfigures it into music. This is the invitation that faces each soul, to live not only as temple, but as bridge, not only as disciple, but as brother or sister, not only as seeker, but as companion. To live the kingdom as communion is to allow love to expand outward, to make of one's life an open table, a dwelling place where others find welcome. The adjuster whispers within, but the Spirit binds across. To listen inwardly is to awaken outwardly. To follow the whisper is to extend the embrace. Communion is both gift and responsibility. It is given in the Spirit, but must be chosen in daily acts of love, fidelity, and forgiveness. Each gesture of kindness, each act of reconciliation, each offering of service makes the kingdom visible here and now. And so the call is clear: live the kingdom as communion. Let your life be part of the cosmic fellowship already unfolding. Refuse the illusion of isolation. Embrace the truth of belonging. See in each neighbor, each stranger, each fellow pilgrim not obstacle but brother, not threat but sister, not other but self in God. For the kingdom is not elsewhere. It is here, in communion, in love, in the great fraternity that binds creation to its source. The kingdom is not a dream deferred, nor a promise postponed to an unknown horizon. It is present, alive, whispering within, shaping daily acts, transfiguring communities. And yet it is more. It is eternal, stretching beyond death, expanding into worlds unseen, fulfilling its promise in realms beyond imagination. To speak of the kingdom is always to speak in paradox. It is now, and it is not yet. It is within time, and it is beyond time. It is intimate as breath and vast as eternity. The Urantia papers 195 to 196 affirm this dual truth. Jesus proclaimed the kingdom not as something to be awaited after death, but as something to be entered here and now. Yet the papers also remind us that this kingdom has no end, that it extends into the eternal journey of the soul, into resurrection and beyond. The adjuster's whisper is the seed of eternity, planted in mortal hearts. To live in the kingdom now is to begin an adventure that will never cease, an ascent that will carry the soul into infinite communion with God. The book of Revelation gives this vision dramatic imagery. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, and the dwelling of God is with men. Revelation 21. This is not only prophecy of distant future, but symbol of eternal reality. The kingdom is not bound to crumbling forms of history. It is fulfillment beyond them. Every tear wiped away, every wound healed, every longing met. This is the kingdom without end, where time itself dissolves into eternity. The Vedantic tradition speaks of the same mystery in another key. It declares the Atman, the true self, as eternal, indestructible, never born and never dying. To awaken to the Atman is to realize that life's essence is already immortal. The kingdom aligns with this truth. What the adjuster whispers is not merely moral advice, but eternal identity. To hear his voice is to remember one's true nature, the self that cannot perish, the soul destined for union. Mystics across ages have intuited this eternal dimension. They spoke of God as the one who is closer than breath, and yet beyond all horizons. They knew that to encounter the kingdom was to encounter hope that death cannot extinguish. Julian of Norwich heard it in her vision. All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. Her words echo the eternal assurance that the kingdom's promise is not fragile, but everlasting. This eternal horizon transforms how we live now. If the kingdom has no end, then every act of fidelity, however small, carries weight beyond death. Nothing done in love is wasted. Every gesture offered to God is woven into eternity. The kingdom is not undone by death, for death is not stronger than the Father who dwells within. To live in the kingdom now is to begin eternity in the present moment. And so the paradox shines. The kingdom is already here, but it will never be exhausted. It begins within, but it stretches without end. It is seed now, harvest later, whisper now, symphony later, presence now, fulfillment forever. To step into the kingdom is to step into a path that has no conclusion, a journey into infinite depths of love, truth, and beauty. Eternity is not merely a horizon beyond death. It is a dimension that breaks into every moment of life. To live in the kingdom now is to taste eternity already, to discover that time itself is permeated with the timeless. This is why Jesus proclaimed the kingdom not as something distant, but as something at hand, within reach, within the heart. The Urantia Papers, paper 195, affirm that faith is the key to perceiving this reality. Faith does not create eternity, it unveils it. It opens the eyes to see that every act of love, every choice of truth, every step of fidelity is already participation in what will never end. To live by faith is to live with eternity alive in the present moment. This transforms our understanding of suffering. Pain often feels like confinement within time. Every moment drawn out, heavy, unbearable. Yet within the kingdom, suffering can be reinterpreted as offering, as participation in something that transcends time. Viktor Frankl's insight echoes here. Suffering ceases to be meaningless when it is given a why. Within the kingdom, the why is eternity. Tears offered to God are not wasted. Wounds embraced in faith become openings through which eternal light enters. This is why the mystics could speak of joy even in sorrow. Julian of Norwich, in the midst of illness and despair, could still affirm, "All shall be well." She did not mean that suffering would vanish immediately, but that eternity gives it meaning, transforms its weight, carries it into fulfillment. The kingdom without end shines already in the midst of anguish, whispering that no suffering is final. The Vedanta tradition affirms a similar truth. The Atman, the true self, is not touched by death or pain. Though the body suffers, though the mind wavers, the Atman remains eternal. To identify with this deeper self is to discover freedom even amid suffering. The kingdom is parallel to this insight. The adjuster whispers of a self deeper than the ego, a life stronger than death, a destiny untouched by loss. The Book of Revelation offers this vision in cosmic imagery. God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death shall be no more. This is not only a promise for some distant era, but a truth already seated in the soul. To live the kingdom now is to trust that eternity is already at work undoing sorrow, already transforming wounds, already weaving fulfillment from fragments. Death and suffering do not have the final word. Love does. And love manifests not only in triumphs, but in daily fidelity. Every act of love, however small, is eternity breaking into time. To forgive when it is difficult, to serve when weary, to hope when despair presses. These choices are already eternal. They are not erased by time. They endure. The kingdom without end is not built on distant victories, but on present fidelity. This also changes how we view death. To those outside the kingdom, death appears as the end, the great negation, the silence after the song. But for those who hear the adjuster's whisper, death is passage, transition, threshold. It is not erasure but expansion, not exile but homecoming. Paper 112 of Urantia describes the survival of personality as assurance of continuity. What is true, beautiful, and good in the soul does not perish. The kingdom without end is the guarantee that life itself cannot be extinguished, for it is grounded in God. Thus, eternity is not to be awaited, but to be lived. It is discovered in the present moment, hidden in gestures of love, alive in acts of fidelity, luminous in suffering transfigured. To live in the kingdom now is to live with death already defeated, with time already transcended, with hope already fulfilled in seed form. The kingdom is not merely future reward, but present reality, the eternal pulsing here and now. The kingdom's eternity is not reserved for the solitary soul alone. It extends outward, embracing not only individuals, but the whole of creation. The Urantia Papers, paper 196, insist that Jesus' message was never about isolated survival, but about universal hope. The kingdom is cosmic. It touches worlds, races, civilizations, and ages yet to come. To believe in it is to believe not only in one's personal destiny, but in the destiny of creation itself. The Book of Revelation gives this cosmic scope its most striking imagery. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the former things have passed away. This is not a promise of annihilation, but of renewal. The kingdom without end is not escape from creation, but its transfiguration. What is broken will be healed. What is fragmented will be unified. What is shadowed will be illumined. The new heaven and new earth are not different realities, but this reality, redeemed, radiant, aligned at last with divine purpose. Vedantic thought resonates with this vision. If the Atman is eternal, then the whole cosmos too bears within it the reflection of Brahman, the ultimate reality. Creation itself is not illusion, but manifestation of the eternal. To awaken to this truth is to see that the kingdom is not merely personal enlightenment, but cosmic fulfillment. The whisper of the adjuster in each soul is part of a chorus sung across galaxies, calling all being back to its source. Mystics of every age have intuited this universal hope. They have spoken of a day when divisions will cease, when enmity will end, when the many will be one. Teilhard de Chardin envisioned this as the omega point, the convergence of evolution into Christ, when all of creation, material and spiritual, would be gathered into unity without loss of uniqueness. In Teilhard's vision, the kingdom without end is not only future, but present trajectory. Creation is already moving, groaning, pressing toward this fullness. This cosmic hope changes how we live now. It means that fidelity in daily acts is not isolated. It contributes to the redemption of the whole. Each gesture of love, each act of truth, each surrender to God adds light to the universe, hastening the dawn of renewal. The adjuster's whisper is not only about personal salvation, but about cooperation in cosmic destiny. To listen is to align oneself with the great current moving creation toward its fulfillment. The Acts of the Apostles give us the first glimpse of this collective hope in history. The disciples discovered that the Spirit did not limit itself to one culture, one people, one language. At Pentecost, voices from every nation heard the message in their own tongue. It was a foretaste of the cosmic communion to come. The kingdom poured out without boundaries, transcending divisions, promising that the Spirit's fire is for all flesh. Rumi sings of this universality with joy. He writes of love as the energy binding not only lovers but stars, not only individuals but the cosmos. The universe is not outside of you, he wrote. Look inside yourself. Everything that you want, you already are. In this sense, the kingdom without end is not something imported from beyond, but revealed as the true nature of creation itself. Communion, love, eternity alive. Thus, the promise is not only personal immortality, but cosmic redemption. The kingdom without end is the assurance that history is not meaningless, that creation is not condemned to decay, that love is stronger than entropy. It is the vision of a universe transfigured, a new heaven and new earth born not from destruction, but from fulfillment. It is the hope that what began as whisper will end as symphony, what began as seed will end as harvest, what began as struggle will end as victory. The kingdom is not a fleeting chapter in history, nor a fragile hope vulnerable to decay. It is the eternal current flowing beneath all existence, the hidden foundation on which time itself rests. To live in the kingdom now is to awaken to a reality that will never pass away, to a communion that grows deeper with every age, to a love that no death can undo. The Urantia Papers, paper 196, insist that this was the heart of Jesus' message, that life is eternal because God is eternal, and the kingdom belongs to those who live in him. What we begin in time, we continue in eternity. Each act of fidelity, each surrender to love, each gesture of trust becomes part of an unbroken story stretching beyond the grave. Death may change the setting, but it cannot silence the song. The book of Revelation captured this truth in vision. Behold, I am making all things new. The promise of a new heaven and new earth is not a fantasy of destruction, but a proclamation of renewal. The kingdom without end is not escape from creation, but its fulfillment, its transfiguration into glory. What is broken will be healed, what is weary will be restored, what is mortal will be clothed in immortality. The Vedantic wisdom echoes, the Atman, the true self, cannot die. Beneath the flux of change, beneath the sorrow of impermanence, there abides a self rooted in eternity. The Adjuster's whisper is confirmation of this reality. You are more than dust. You are more than passing shadow. You are destined for union with the infinite, bearer of an indestructible spark. Mystics across the ages knew this well. They did not promise lives free of struggle, but they testified that beneath every storm there is stillness. Beneath every loss there is unbreakable presence. Beneath every ending there is renewal. Rumi could sing of dying into love as no ending at all, but a beginning without end. Julian of Norwich could affirm that all shall be well, because she glimpsed eternity shimmering beneath the pain of time. This vision is not only consolation, it is calling. To know that the kingdom has no end is to live differently now. It is to treat every act of love as eternal, every choice for truth as indestructible, every gesture of mercy as seed of the new creation. The kingdom is not fragile, it is unstoppable. To live in it is to cooperate with the very movement of eternity. And this is the paradox. Eternity is both beyond and within. It is future, yes, a destiny of fusion, communion, resurrection, and cosmic renewal. But it is also present here, now, hidden in breath, alive in love, pulsing in every moment. To live the kingdom now is to participate already in its eternity. To step into love is to step into forever. The invitation is clear. Live not as one bound by fear of endings, but as one rooted in beginnings without end. Let your life reflect the confidence that nothing done in love is wasted, that no suffering is meaningless, that no death is final. The kingdom without end is the assurance that God is faithful, that eternity has already begun, that hope is not illusion but reality. So let us live as citizens of this kingdom, already present, still coming, always eternal. Let us walk in fidelity, breathe in hope, act in love, knowing that every step carries us deeper into the endless embrace of God. For the kingdom has no end. It is Alpha and Omega, seed and harvest, present and future, within and beyond. It is eternity alive. The kingdom was never meant to remain a concept, an abstract ideal hovering above life. It was never designed to be locked in temples of stone or preserved only in sacred texts. It was meant to live in hearts, in breath, in the hidden places where spirit and flesh meet. The kingdom lives in you. The Urantia Papers, paper 196, affirm that the message of Jesus culminates not in external authority, but in inward realization. He announced a Father who dwells not on distant thrones, but in the intimacy of the soul. The kingdom is God's dwelling in humanity, the Adjuster whispering, the Spirit of truth illuminating, the presence of the Son guiding. To awaken to this is to discover that you yourself are the holy ground where eternity takes root. The Gospel of Thomas captures this with piercing clarity. The kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you. When you know yourselves, then you will be known. The kingdom is not hidden in heavens beyond reach. It is hidden in the depths of your own being. To seek it outside, while ignoring it within, is to miss the treasure underfoot. Self-knowledge, not as narcissism, but as spiritual unveiling, becomes the key to the kingdom. To know oneself is to know the God who abides in secret. Theosophical insight echoes this. The Christ is not only the historical figure who walked the hills of Galilee, but the inner light planted in every soul. The Christ within is the seed of divinity, the eternal word waiting to be spoken through your life. To embody the kingdom is to let that Christ within awaken, to allow his presence to shape your thoughts, your words, your deeds. Mystics like Rumi sang of this same truth in Metaphors of Love. The door to the heart is the door to the universe, he whispered. The beloved waits not beyond stars, but within, at the threshold of your own soul. The kingdom is this union, to open the heart's door and to discover that heaven was closer than your own breath. But to say that the kingdom lives in you is not to say it lives in you alone. For the same presence inhabits every soul. To awaken to the kingdom is to recognize it in others, to honor the divine spark in each face, to live as though every encounter were sacred. The kingdom in you calls you to see the kingdom in your neighbor. Communion begins here, when the divine presence within one heart salutes the divine presence within another. This is the invitation of the kingdom without end. Not only to believe, but to embody, not only to admire, but to incarnate. The message is not, seek there. It is, become here. Do not wait for the kingdom to come as if from elsewhere. Let it be born in your words, your acts, your silence. For when the kingdom lives in you, it lives also in the world. To say that the kingdom lives in you is to speak not of abstraction, but of embodiment. It is not an idea to admire from afar. It is a reality to be lived here and now, in the textures of daily life. The kingdom asks not only for assent of mind, but for offering of body, heart, and soul. It longs to be enfleshed in your words, in your actions, in your silences. The Urantia papers remind us that Jesus did not preach a religion of ritual, but a life of presence. He taught that true worship is not confined to temples made by hands, but flows wherever the heart opens to God in truth. Thus, the kingdom becomes a daily liturgy. Every gesture a prayer, every moment an altar, every encounter a sacrament. To awaken in the morning is to rise into liturgy. To break bread is to participate in communion. To forgive is to offer incense sweeter than smoke. The Gospel of Thomas strikes the same chord. If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. The kingdom is already planted within. Your task is to bring forth. This does not happen in rare ecstasies alone, but in the rhythm of ordinary life. To be faithful in small things, to practice kindness where none is expected, to choose honesty when silence would be easier. These are the offerings that reveal the kingdom. Mystics like Teresa of Avila spoke of the soul as a castle with many rooms. To embody the kingdom is to dwell consciously in that castle, to move inward with awareness, to open doors where the beloved already waits. Daily life is not a distraction from this dwelling. It is the corridor that leads to the innermost chamber. Washing dishes, caring for children, working in fields or offices, each can be done with awareness that God is present, that the kingdom breathes here. Rumi turns this into poetry of love. Let yourself be silently drawn by the stronger pull of what you truly love. To embody the kingdom is to surrender to that pull, to let love shape your days, not as duty alone, but as joy. It means to discover that every act done in love is already eternity expressed in time. Theosophy affirms this too in its teaching of the Christ within. The inner light seeks not only recognition, but expression. To embody the kingdom is to let that light shine, not hidden under fear or ego, but revealed in compassion, justice, creativity, tenderness. The Christ within you longs to walk through your hands, to speak through your mouth, to shine through your eyes. And this embodiment is not solitary. When the kingdom lives in you, it inevitably touches others. To greet another with dignity, to offer a word of encouragement, to resist the temptation to wound, these ripple outward. The kingdom within becomes the kingdom among. Communion is born when individuals embody the kingdom together, making of their relationships a living temple. This is the challenge and the promise that eternity is not distant, but hidden in the present moment. To embody the kingdom is to live as though time itself were sacred, as though each encounter were eternal, as though every act of love were indestructible. It is to trust that the kingdom is not elsewhere to be awaited, but here to be lived. And so the invitation stands, let the kingdom live in you, not in theory, not in dream, but in the ordinariness of now. Let your life become altar, your breath become prayer, your presence become sign of eternity. For the kingdom does not wait outside, it waits within, longing to be born into the world through you. The journey of this work has been long, weaving through history and eternity, through Jesus' life and the eternal whisper of the adjuster, through parables, shadows, struggles, and promises. Yet its end is no conclusion, because the kingdom itself has no end. Its final word is not finished, but continue. And that continuation is not written in books or proclaimed in distant heavens. It is carried in you. The Urantia Papers, paper 196, declare that the greatest truth is not the record of Jesus' teachings, but his living presence within each believer. The kingdom endures because it is alive in the soul, because the spirit of truth continues to guide, because the divine fragment never departs. What Jesus began in Galilee was not a movement bound by geography or era. It was a seed of eternity planted in humanity's heart, meant to grow in every age. The Gospel of Thomas reminds us, if those who lead you say to you, see, the kingdom is in the sky, then the birds will precede you. If they say to you, it is in the sea, then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you. The invitation is unmistakable. Do not wait for the kingdom elsewhere. Do not postpone its reality for another world or another time. Open your eyes. Open your heart. The kingdom is here. Mystics across centuries echoed this same truth. Theosophists spoke of the inner Christ, the light hidden in every soul, waiting to be unveiled. Rumi sang of the heart as the door of the universe, urging us to step inward, to step beyond. Augustine confessed that God was more intimate to him than he was to himself. All converge on this testimony. The kingdom's throne is the human heart. And so the question becomes personal. Will you let the kingdom live in you? Will you allow the whisper to shape your choices, the presence to guide your days, the love to define your being? This is the only response the kingdom asks. Not belief alone, not admiration at a distance, but embodiment. Let the Christ within awaken. Let the divine seed grow. Let the eternal fire burn in the hearth of your soul. For when the kingdom lives in you, it lives in the world. Your fidelity becomes light for others. Your compassion becomes shelter. Your forgiveness becomes doorway. You become not only recipient of the kingdom, but bearer of it. Not only pilgrim, but temple. Not only seeker, but revelation. The world does not need new signs written in the sky. It needs living witnesses whose lives whisper eternity. This is how the kingdom without end continues. In every heart that chooses love over fear, presence over distraction, communion over isolation, truth over illusion. It is not preserved by power or guarded by walls. It is embodied in lives surrendered to God. And that embodiment is yours to choose here now. So take these words not as ending, but as beginning. Let them echo not in memory alone, but in action. Let them call you not only to reflection, but to transformation. The kingdom is not tomorrow, it is today. It is not distant, it is within. It does not wait. It lives, it breathes, it longs to be born through you. The final invitation is simple and unending. Live as though eternity were already here, because it is. Let the kingdom live in you.